Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Heather Rich. We all experience youthful adventures, a rebellious spirit, and the transition into adulthood. However, for some, adolescence can become perilous. In the remote southern region of Oklahoma, USA, lies a quiet town named Waurika. This small community has around 2,000 residents, where everyone knows one another, and life is calm and steady. In the fall of 1996, the Rich family lived in Oklahoma. Mom Gail, Dad Dwayne Rich, and their 4 children, 3 boys, and a girl named Heather. At the time, Heather was a sophomore in high school. She was an excellent student and cheerleader, known for her beauty and ability to attract attention. Heather was kind, but had a rebellious streak in her teenage years. On the evening of October 2, 1996, an argument broke out between Gail and Heather. They discussed a phone bill that cost the family $300, which upset Gail's mother, who disapproved of Heather's spending habits. Dwayne, the father, on the other hand, remained calm about the situation. Gail explained to Heather that due to the family's difficult financial situation, she could not afford to pay the large monthly bills. Dwayne, an electrician, had suffered severe burns from a transformer explosion and required extensive medical care and skin grafts. He was unable to work and support the family, forcing Gail to take on additional work to make ends meet. Every dollar was important, especially since Dwayne was about to undergo expensive surgery. Gail wanted Heather to learn the value of money and the importance of being self-sufficient, but Heather struggled with this, leading to a serious argument between them. After things calmed down, Heather went to bed. She stopped by the living room to say goodnight to her father, but walked past her mother in silence to express her resentment. The next morning, October 3, Gail woke everyone up for breakfast, as was their usual routine. However, Heather did not come down for breakfast. Gail believed that it was because Heather was angry due to the events of the previous night. Gail hoped that when Heather was hungry, she would come down to eat. But after a while, Heather still did not appear. Gail went up to check on her in her room. Gail was surprised to find the room empty. At that time, cell phones were not common, and Heather did not have a phone. Worried, her parents called one of Heather's friends, but no one knew where she was. This behavior was unusual for Heather. She had never run away before and didn't have any mental health issues. She always took care of her appearance and wouldn't leave the house for long without changing clothes or doing her makeup. With all her belongings still at home, worried Gail and Dwayne immediately went to the sheriff's department in Wow to report their daughter missing. Gail explains their argument from the previous day, when Gail expressed her frustration over the large phone bill, which was a significant burden on the family, and Heather appeared stubborn and determined not to admit her mistake. The sheriff tried to reassure the parents by comparing the situation to a typical teenage runaway, especially after an argument with her mother. However, this behavior was unusual for Heather, who usually tried to find a compromise even after a disagreement. The sheriff explained that most runaways returned home after a period of time. They suggested to the parents that Heather might have returned while they were at the sheriff's office. The police told Gail and Dwayne that Heather would need to be missing for at least a day before they could officially declare her missing. Since that time had not passed, the police could not accept their report. Frustrated and worried, Gail and Dwayne believed that something was wrong and that their daughter was in danger. They began searching all over town, starting with Heather's closest friends. One of these friends was Randy Wood, a 17-year-old boy who was the captain of the school's football team. He had dated Heather, but they had quickly broken up and agreed to remain friends. Importantly, he was one of the boys responsible for Heather's large phone bill. When asked about Heather's whereabouts, Randy said that he did not know where Heather was or what had happened to her. Gail then decided to contact another friend of Heather's, a 17-year-old high school student named Joshua Luke Bagwell, whom Heather had just started dating. When Gail called, Joshua's grandmother answered and said that he was resting after a party. She wanted to let him sleep and refused to wake him up to take the call. Joshua's grandmother said she was cleaning out the trailer in their yard where the school children had played the night before. When the mother asked about her daughter's disappearance, she said she didn't know. Relatives then searched the area for any sign of Heather. After a day of unsuccessful searching, her parents returned to the police station, and eventually the police joined the search effort. By October 10, a week after the search began, no useful information about Heather had been found. Given the amount of time that had passed, few people still held out hope of finding her alive. When searchers reached the area near the Texas border, a body was found floating face down, partially submerged in muddy water. Observers from a bridge noticed that the body was covered in mud, making it difficult to see in the murky water, as if someone had deliberately obscured it. When a diver finally recovered the body and brought it to shore, it was observed that the body had been severely mutilated, with multiple gunshot wounds. A forensic examination was conducted. Experts later determined that the victim had been shot 9 times at close range. The condition of the body was horrific, with many serious cuts. During this time, there was only one missing person in the area, so Heather's parents were asked to identify the body. They only recognized their daughter through the ring on her finger, an engraved piece of jewelry that her mother had given her. Later, dental records confirmed that it was indeed Heather's body. The news of her death quickly became the talk of the town the next day. Within hours, the entire village knew about the case. Randy Wood also heard the shocking news that same day. It just so happened that Randy had been crowned king of several football seasons that day. It was expected that there would be a big celebration after the game. However, Randy was deeply affected by what had happened to his ex-girlfriend Heather. He then went to the bridge and stared at the spot where Heather's body was found for a long time. In fact, he knew more about the situation than he had shared with Heather's parents. The investigation quickly led the police to Randy and some of his friends. One of them is the son of wealthy parents. The second is the best football player in school and captain of the team. The third is an ambitious criminal from the streets. As soon as the police got involved in the case, they spoke to Heather's parents. By that time, Gail had contacted several of Heather's friends and acquaintances. Gail became suspicious of 2 young men: Heather's ex-boyfriend, 17-year-old Randy Wood, and her current boyfriend, Joshua Luke Bagwell, who slept after a party and did not answer Gail's phone calls. She believed they were hiding something. These high school students appeared to be reciting rehearsed answers, and when pressed with further questions, they struggled to answer. Their behavior was quite tense. Gail believes that Randy and Joshua have more information than they are admitting. While talking to Heather's classmates and friends, the police have gathered many clues that Joshua and Randy know important details. And they should assist the police in uncovering what happened on that tragic night when Heather left home after an argument with her mother. Heather's best friend told her that Heather was planning to attend a party that night to meet her boyfriend, Joshua. Even though her parents had forbidden her from leaving the house after dark, she decided to sneak out. After her parents fell asleep, she climbed out of the window around 11 p.m. At the party, she was supposed to meet Joshua and Randy. Joshua came from a wealthy family and always arrived in fancy cars and dressed better than his peers. Randy comes from a humble family, but his athletic talents make him as popular as his wealthy friend Joshua. Randy is an attractive young man who is admired for his ability to play football at a professional level. Randy has earned the position of captain of the team through his skills and is recognized as the best player in town. Randy and Joshua are close friends. They often spend weekends driving Joshua's car along country roads. They often hang out with girls and drink frequently and smoke occasionally. There were few places for teenagers to hang out in the city, so they found their own ways to have fun. Heather, along with a friend, experimented with drinking and hanging out with popular boys. The night before she disappeared, she left home to spend time with them. On September 27, 1996, just 5 days before Heather went missing, Heather and another cheerleader were found in the hallway of the stadium with marijuana and smoking paraphernalia. It was also revealed that Heather had been drinking alcohol. As a result, she was suspended from school for 3 days. And her parents learned about this from her teacher. They were upset, as they never expected their 16-year-old daughter to engage in such dangerous behavior. Heather explained that curiosity led her to try these substances. She promised her parents that she would stop. Her parents became increasingly concerned about why she had chosen this path, as she was an excellent student and athlete. Although her parents believed her promise to quit, they found it difficult to confirm whether she was telling the truth. Bad habits may have played a direct role in her death. Police focused on Joshua and Randy to uncover the events at the party before Heather disappeared. Randy said he and Joshua had been in a trailer behind Joshua's house, where they spent the evening playing and drinking. However, both insisted they had not seen Heather that night, which raised the police's suspicions. The two young men told their stories in identical, almost rehearsed ways, they showing little emotion. This behavior led police to suspect that the teens were not telling the truth. At this stage, the police lacked evidence linking Joshua and Randy to the crime. However, their unusual behavior raised suspicions of their involvement. As a result, both young men became prime suspects, prompting a closer look at their backgrounds, their connection to Heather, and the events of that night's party. The autopsy revealed new insights, particularly regarding the number of shots fired at Heather. Remarkably, even police handguns typically only held 8 rounds. This begs the question, why reload the gun to fire another shot when the person was clearly dead? The second notable detail was the type of ammunition used to kill Heather. The killer chose Winchester double-shot. These bullets were quite rare and could only be purchased from one store in the city. Police checked the store's receipts and discovered that just before the murder, only one person had purchased this type of ammunition. The seller identified the buyer as Joshua in photos provided by the police. He came into the store and bought a whole box of 20 bullets. The seller also mentioned that Joshua was with another person. This person was not Randy, but Joshua's close friend, Curtis Allen Gamble, who was known to the police. He had a history of legal trouble, including multiple arrests. Despite his young age, Curtis had spent much of his life in juvenile facilities. He had a troubled past, having been arrested for drunk driving and shooting at animals, and even passers-by. Curtis quickly became the prime suspect, as Joshua and Randy had no previous legal problems and were never considered aggressive or dangerous. On October 23, police went to Curtis's home in another city. Notably, just a short distance from his home was a bridge over the river where Heather's body was discovered. After police arrived and found Curtis was not home, they spoke with his grandmother. She shared information about her grandson and noted that Curtis was very familiar with the area of the neighboring city and frequently visited the bridge where Heather was found. She mentioned that she used to take him fishing at that location when he was a child. The next day, Curtis was arrested and taken to the Orica Sheriff's Office. The interrogation lasted over 8 hours, during which Curtis remained mostly silent but agreed to take a lie detector test. However, the most important information the police learned was that Curtis admitted to owning a Mossberg handgun. This type of handgun can use a special type of bullet. Police suspected that he may have owned the weapon used in the murder. Investigations revealed that Heather had been shot with this rare type of handgun. After they seized the weapon and conducted gun tests, experts confirmed that it was indeed the weapon used to kill Heather. When the police presented evidence linking Curtis to Heather's murder, the investigation took a significant break. Curtis broke down and told the police that his 2 friends, Randy and Joshua, were involved in the murder. Curtis then wrote a 1-page confession. The police were able to identify the killers. Randy and Joshua were then arrested and taken to the sheriff's department. There, the police presented Curtis's confession, in which Curtis was the one who wanted to kill Heather and that he initiated the attack. However, he was not the one who actually carried out the murder. According to Curtis, he gave Joshua his weapon and forced Joshua to shoot Heather. However, the police were skeptical of Curtis's confession, as Joshua did not fit the profile of a criminal. Joshua had no previous problems with the law, was known to be a model student, an excellent athlete, and was generally well-liked. The party took place in southern Oklahoma, while the murder took place in Texas. As a result, they had to appear in court in Texas, where the crime could result in the death penalty. After being pressured by the police, Randy finally spoke during a second interview. However, he denied any involvement in the murder, saying that Curtis committed the crime and that Joshua assisted him. Joshua, meanwhile, chose not to cooperate with the investigation. In October 1996, the police received two conflicting confessions. They decided to believe Randy's story, especially since he had passed a lie detector test. According to Randy, he had planned to go out drinking with his friends Curtis and Joshua that night. Randy later learned that Heather was supposed to be joining them. Heather knew Joshua and Randy, but had never met Curtis, so she had no idea he could be dangerous. That night, everyone drank a lot of alcohol, and Heather gradually lost consciousness. In her drunken state, Curtis harassed her and tried to attack her. Although she could barely speak, Curtis was afraid that when she woke up, she would remember what had happened. Knowing that rape was a serious crime that could result in a prison sentence, Curtis suggested that Heather be eliminated to avoid consequences. Randy thought he was joking, but he was serious. Curtis took a handgun from his car and aimed it at everyone present. Joshua and Randy understood the danger they were in, so they chose not to resist. They put the intoxicated Heather in the trunk of Joshua's car and drove towards Curtis's house. Before they arrived, Curtis led them across a bridge where Heather's body was later discovered. Curtis ordered the car to stop in the middle of the bridge and told them to pull Heather out of the trunk and place her near the railing. Fearing for their own safety, Joshua and Randy complied, but Heather was too intoxicated to stand. They left her on the ground. Curtis approached Heather and began shooting at close range. Randy saw a large hole appear in Heather's skull and instinctively covered his eyes, not wanting to see anymore. Curtis unloaded all his bullets on her. Curtis and Joshua then dumped her off the bridge and drove away. Randy said they were horrified by what they had just witnessed and the extent of the cruelty Curtis had inflicted on Heather. They decided to remain silent out of fear for their own lives. In October 1996, Randy Wood, Joshua Luke Bagwell, and Curtis Allen Gamble were charged with the kidnapping and murder of 16-year-old Heather. Of the three, Joshua was the most difficult to deal with because he would not confess, remained silent, and there was virtually no evidence against him. The prosecutor had to rely on the testimony of Randy and Curtis, but their testimony was inconsistent. To resolve this problem, the prosecutor offered Randy a deal. He had to testify against Joshua in exchange for life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in 30 years. Randy quickly accepted the offer. On October 15, Curtis agreed to a plea deal that could have resulted in life imprisonment without parole. However, while in prison awaiting trial, Curtis assaulted a security guard, knocking him down and attempting to choke him before other guards intervened. Nearly a year and a half after Heather's death. In February 1998, Joshua's trial began. The defense made numerous attempts to justify the actions of those involved in the crime. The attorneys sought to discredit Heather by portraying her as an alcoholic and a womanizer, claiming that she had an inappropriate relationship with Curtis and that she had begun to threaten others. They argued that this behavior motivated Curtis to choose to eliminate her. Heather's parents defended their daughter, insisting that Heather was a talented athlete and a good person. She accidentally went with a bad group of friends and met a criminal. The floor was unexpectedly given to Curtis, he reiterating his claim that Joshua had nothing to do with the crime and had no knowledge of the planned murder. He claimed that Randy was the one who shot Heather. In a surprising turn of events, Randy refused to take the plea deal. He did not want his confession to be seen as an attempt to save himself and put others at risk. In court, he stated that he wanted to seek justice for Heather, despite his attorney advising him not to. Although this noble choice put him at risk of the death penalty, it left a strong impression on Heather's parents, who later met with Randy in person to discuss the situation. On February 14, Randy took the stand before the jury, sharing his account of the tragic events of that night, and the jury believed him completely. Randy described how Joshua had participated in Heather's murder along with Curtis, and also detailed Curtis's role in covering up the crime. That day, Curtis was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder, resulting in a sentence of life in prison plus 99 years. On May 8, Heather's and Randy's parents met during a live broadcast. Despite their deep sorrow over their loss, they were struck by the honesty of Randy and the genuine remorse he showed. On August 7, 1998, Randy Wood's trial ended, and he was found guilty of murdering the Heather, receiving a life sentence with the chance of parole after 40 years. Many people were upset by this verdict, as Randy was the only one who demonstrated remorse and risked his own safety to tell the truth. Many felt that he did not deserve such a severe punishment. Joshua was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was placed in the same correctional facility as Curtis. In January 2002, both men made a bold escape at night and evaded capture for 10 days while hiding in Texas, prompting a national alert. Eventually, they were caught and returned to prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ilona Flint. On December 23, 2013, 22-year-old Ilona Flint finished her shift at a shopping center store where she often worked late during the Christmas season. This night, she left work just after midnight, expecting her boyfriend to pick her up from the parking lot. However, he did not arrive and did not respond to her messages. Concerned, she reached out to her boyfriend's brother, whom she got along with well, and asked him for a ride home. He agreed to help her, but unfortunately, they never made it home. On that fateful night, a dangerous criminal chose to practice his murderous skills by targeting the Belvedere family. This decision led to a terrible tragedy. The Belvedere family was well respected and had a reputation for being good, honest, and crime-free. Ilona had just moved to San Diego, California, where she was lively, energetic, and determined. Love had blossomed between her and Gianni Belvedere, and they had announced their engagement shortly before the tragedy. They loved each other and were eager to start a family together. Gianni's parents had become very close to Ilona. They treated her like their own daughter, and they had a wonderful relationship from the very beginning. All of this contributed to their belief in a bright future for the couple. Not even their brightest dreams could protect them from the violent criminals of 2013. A shooting broke out in the parking lot of the Minville Shopping Center in San Diego. One of the store employees noticed a suspicious person and called the police. Before that, Ilona Flint frantically dialed 911, telling the dispatcher that a stranger was threatening her. The driver of the car she was in was her boyfriend's 2-year-old brother, Salvatore Belvedere. Suddenly, the call with Ilona was interrupted. The dispatcher sent patrol officers to the area to investigate. In just a few minutes, the patrol arrived at the incident scene. Inside the car, they found Ilona and Salvatore unconscious. Ilona was slumped in the front passenger seat, and police identified 2 gunshot wounds on her body, one in her chest and another in the back of her head, which was fatal. Despite brief tries to revive her, it became evident that Ilona would not wake up. Doctors later confirmed her death, noting that the assailant had shot both her and the driver while Ilona was on the phone. During the call with the dispatcher, no background noise or gunshots were heard. Police reviewed the call recording and interviewed the witness who reported the incident. She also did not hear any loud noises. As a result, police believe the attacker used a pistol with a silencer. The investigation confirmed that the assassin had a .22 caliber pistol. The boy, Salvatore, was in critical condition after being shot in the face, right between the eyes. When police arrived, he was still alive and was rushed to the hospital. Despite the doctor's efforts to save him, he fell into a coma and died 2 days later. This left the police without any valuable information from him. Forensic experts started by examining the vehicle where the Ilona and Salvatore were shot. Sadly, they found no evidence of a third person either inside or outside the car. They discovered that the vehicle in which Ilona and Salvatore were found belonged to Leonardo Belvedere, Salvatore's father. Police intended to inform the car owner about the tragic incident and also wanted to speak with Gianni, Ilona's new fiancé. However, they could not find Gianni at his home. Leonardo went to the shopping mall where the incident occurred and waited for news of Gianni. Leonardo was the first to notice that something was wrong. Gianni usually arrived at the mall early and waited for Ilona in the parking lot, so his absence caused concern. Leonardo tried to call him, but Gianni did not answer any calls or messages, which was completely unlike him. This unusual behavior prompted Leonardo to go looking for his son. The police issued a notice for Gianni in his green Toyota Camry. There was suspicion that Gianni was involved in the murder of Ilona and her brother Salvatore, possibly due to a conflict between young people that led to the tragedy. The search for Gianni in his car began throughout the city, as the police had a number of questions for him. They needed to determine if his girlfriend Ilona had any disputes with anyone that could have endangered her life. And they also needed to confirm his alibi. To get those answers, the police had to speak directly with Gianni. The first clue had emerged. Police had received information from dispatchers that could lead to a suspect. Police learned that shortly after Ilona contacted emergency services, a mall employee had called to report seeing a suspicious vehicle with an unknown man standing next to it. The man, who appeared to be of average height, was standing behind the driver's side window of the one vehicle. Although the witness did not hear any gunshots, screams, or signs of a struggle, she found the man's behavior unusual. He made some strange gestures before quickly returning to his car. Fortunately, the witness had taken a good look at the vehicle and provided police with a detailed description. The vehicle was very similar to the one Gianni had been driving when he went missing. At this point, police began to consider Ilona's fiancé, Gianni, as a prime suspect, as he was likely present at the crime scene. Police obtained surveillance footage, which further strengthened their belief in the reliability of an eyewitness account of the shooter. Based on the recordings, they created a description to help identify the suspect, a man of unknown race, of average height, wearing brown pants and a shirt with some resemblance to Gianni. This raised concerns for police, as it suggested a possible love triangle. Police speculated that Gianni had discovered Ilona and Salvatore's affair. It is believed that Gianni may have encountered them in the parking lot of a shopping mall. In a fit of rage, he is believed to have shot both of them with a pistol equipped with a silencer before fleeing the scene. While this scenario is common in love triangles, it remains a theory that needs to be confirmed. Friends of the couple have dismissed the police theories, insisting that Ilona had nothing to do with Salvatore. They believe that she was deeply in love with Gianni and that both young people were victims of an attack by an unknown assailant, while Gianni had nothing to do with the crime. There is even the possibility that he was kidnapped. Even with this testimony, the police still did not rule out Gianni as a suspect. The police returned to speak with Leonardo, the father of the Belvedere family. The police informed Leonardo that Gianni was considered one of the prime suspects in the case. However, for Gianni's family and friends, this was hard to believe. They could not imagine him being involved in any kind of heinous act. Gianni had always been a well-mannered and calm person. He did not associate with troublemakers. He was known for his intelligence, optimism, and ambitious plans for the future, including with his beloved Ilona. The idea that he could have resorted to violence against his own brother and fiancé seemed completely absurd. While the police searched for Gianni, his family reached out to him through the media, believing there had been a misunderstanding and that he would return home soon. Despite suspicions surrounding him, his mother and sister encouraged him to come back to clear his name. They also appealed to anyone who might have information about Gianni's whereabouts. Unfortunately, they received no significant leads. Police explored the possibility that someone else might be involved in the murders of the two young victims, yet they felt it was important to keep an eye on Gianni for any possible threats. They also looked into the involvement of organized crime, considering whether the victims might have been gang members or had connections to drug activities and deaths. However, there was no evidence linking them to illegal substances or criminal activity. Toxicology reports showed no traces of alcohol or drugs in their body, and neither had a criminal record or enemies who wanted to harm them. The crime appeared to be planned specifically targeting Ilona and Salvatore. The perpetrator acted with determination and confidence, leading police to dismiss the idea that the victims were simply random targets of a violent attack. Despite this, none of Gianni's acquaintances believed he could have carried out such a brutal crime. Nevertheless, police remained convinced that the incidents were closely tied to him and found his disappearance highly suspicious. Police decided to investigate the Gianni's mobile phone history. They found that his phone had been turned off at 11:45 p.m. on the night of the double murder and had not been turned back on since. Gianni's last call was to his cousin. The police contacted this relative to gather more information about their conversation that evening. The cousin confirmed that Gianni had called him but mentioned that nothing unusual was discussed. They casually chatted and Gianni simply mentioned he was going to the mall to pick up Ilona, as he usually did. That concluded their conversation. Ilona did not enjoy driving, despite having a driver's license, so Gianni always picked her up after work. Police were able to access Ilona's cell phone records, who was found dead in the mall parking lot. They discovered that shortly before her death, she had sent several text messages to Gianni, but he had ignored them. Ilona attempted to contact him after 2:45 p.m. but no one answered. She then called Gianni's brother Salvatore, asking him to pick her up from the parking lot. Salvatore agreed and drove to her location. It was revealed that they had been in a car in the parking lot from midnight to 1 a.m. Ilona was very worried about Gianni, prompting her to call friends, acquaintances, the local hospital, and the morgue to find him. This behavior was unusual for her, suggesting that she was increasingly worried that he might have had an accident on the way to the mall. On January 17, 2014, the police received an important tip in the case. A witness reported seeing a suspicious car parked near her home for an extended period. The abandoned vehicle was identified as Gianni's Toyota Camry, located in a remote area of Riverside, San Diego. The police were alarmed by a foul odor coming from the car, which piqued their interest. They quickly arrived at the scene and checked the car's license plates against their database, discovering that the plates were fake. Upon further investigation, they found out that the car belonged to the missing person, Gianni. Officers entered the car and noticed blood on the passenger seat, which was a concerning sign. While inspecting the vehicle, they also detected a strong odor of decomposition, particularly near the trunk. The police recognized this smell, indicating that a body was nearby. Unfortunately, they discovered the body of a person, believed to be Gianni, in an advanced state of decomposition. Due to the hot weather, dental records were needed for identification. A forensic expert confirmed the police suspicions. It was indeed Gianni. After the identification, the victim's family was informed of the tragic news. They were devastated, as they had held on to hope that their son would be safe. The police were faced with a serious situation. Who would want to harm these young individuals? A forensic examination revealed that Gianni had been dead for approximately 3 weeks before he was discovered. A bullet was found in his skull, which was the cause of Gianni's death. Based on the position of the body and the nature of the wounds, it appeared that the shooter was on his side when the shot was fired. The bullet entered behind Gianni's left ear, causing fatal injuries. He died of blood loss. Police analyzed the bullet that killed Gianni and matched it to the bullets that killed Salvatore and Ilona. Ballistics tests confirmed that all the bullets were fired from the same type of weapon. It is possible that all the victims were killed by the same person. Could it have been an accident? A deliberate crime resulted in the deaths of the young people. But the theory of a love triangle was eventually ruled out. The police decided to start their investigation from scratch. In the trunk of Gianni's car, forensic experts discovered several empty air freshener cans. These had been left behind by the attacker after repinning the buttons. This may have been an attempt to hide the smell of decomposition from the car for as long as possible. Although experts were unable to collect DNA samples from the suspect to identify the killer, they noted that the buttons on the air freshener cans had been secured with pieces of tape. After a thorough examination, the police discovered tiny traces of DNA on one of the tapes, hoping to gather clues about the mysterious killer. They entered this information into a database, but unfortunately, there were no matches. This suggests that the killer likely does not have a criminal record. However, this process was still valuable, as the system would automatically notify them if a matching DNA sample was ever added to the database. Despite this setback with the DNA, the case took a new turn soon after. Less than a day after Gianni's body was found, on January 18th, another incident occurred that initially appeared unrelated. During the investigation of the triple murder, police officers uncovered important clues. About an hour's drive from San Diego, security officers in San Clemente stopped a man at a checkpoint. He appeared nervous and suspicious during the inspection of his car, which revealed a large cache of weapons in the trunk. This included an AR-15 assault rifle, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, a .45 caliber pistol, and a .22 caliber pistol equipped with a rifled barrel and a homemade silencer. The man, heavily armed, was identified as Carlo Mercado, who was 29 years old at the time of his arrest. The police database indicated that Carlo legally owned 2 firearms. He did not have any previous convictions, and he was not listed as a potential threat in law enforcement records. As a result, he was released immediately, and his guns were confiscated. However, officers later discovered he also had an illegal pistol of that caliber. Given the presence of a homemade silencer, this illegal pistol might have been the weapon used in the triple murder. The police spent 4 months collecting evidence and preparing charges while waiting for the investigation to conclude. Special agents took charge of examining the confiscated weapons, focusing on the illegal distribution of firearms. Carlo had already admitted guilt for the illegal use of weapons after police offered him a plea deal. This deal was essential for them to formally request DNA samples from the Carlo. Once he agreed, the samples were collected and checked against the police database. This led to a match with DNA taken from the Scotch tape found in Gianni's car, which had previously been uploaded to the database. A ballistic examination of Carlo's pistol confirmed that it was the weapon used to shoot all 3 young victims. To further establish his connection to the crime, police analyzed geolocation data from Carlo's mobile phone. This analysis showed that he was near the shopping center at the time of the shooting. His motorcycle had broken down, which made it difficult for the police to find him initially, as he did not appear in most of the security camera footage. However, some footage did capture the motorcycle he used to get to the parking lot, where he was seen standing next to it. When Carlo spotted Gianni's car while he was waiting for her Ilona, Carlo saw it as a perfect chance to steal a vehicle. He attempted to threaten Gianni into handing over the car keys, but Gianni fought back. Gianni was unaware of Carlo's dangerous obsession with weapons. He fancied himself a killer and had long fantasized about using a gun. The police later discovered evidence of this obsession during their investigation. Carlo frequently searched the internet for information about weapons, often focusing on gun-related murders, including mass school shootings. His bizarre fantasies prompted him to act. He approached Gianni's car and, in one swift motion, pulled out a .22 caliber pistol. He shot Gianni at close range, then climbed into the car and pushed him into the passenger seat. Excited by the act of acting out his violent fantasy, he drove around the parking lot in Gianni's car before leaving the scene of the crime. Carlo drove to the nearest gas station, as confirmed by the geolocation on his phone. He then decided to go back to get his motorbike, which he had left in a parking lot. On the way back, he crashed into a car carrying Salvatore and Ilona. They recognized it as Gianni's car, and Ilona was excited to see her lover's car. She signaled Salvatore to come closer, but this turned out to be a grave mistake. When she realized that the driver was not her boyfriend, it was too late. Ilona panicked and tried to call emergency services, but was unable to finish the call because a bullet had hit her car. Carlo shot Ilona and Salvatore, the brother of the first victim. After killing them, he drove to a gas station and filled up Gianni's car, while the owner was still inside, having bled to death from a gunshot wound. The next morning, Carlo began looking into a murder that had occurred on Christmas Eve. Police later discovered Carlo's fingerprints on the gas cap of Gianni's car. Their efforts to collect and analyze evidence paid off. As a result, in April 2014, Carlo Mercado was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder. Initially, Carlo maintained his innocence. He denied using a weapon against the victims, arguing that he did not know them and had no involvement in the murders. However, the prosecution continued to analyze the evidence, building a case that would ensure the criminal would be imprisoned for life. In June 2014, the trial began, with the prosecution arguing that the attack stemmed from a desire to steal Gianni's car. The prosecution claimed that Gianni had gone to the mall to meet Ilona and was waiting for her in the parking lot. While there, Gianni confronted Carlo, who had also come to the mall. In a fit of rage, Carlo used an unregistered pistol equipped with a silencer. After firing the shots, he fled in Gianni's car. Security cameras recorded the incident and Carlo realized that the police would be looking for the car. To avoid arrest, he changed the car's original license plate to a fake one, filled it with gas, and then returned to the mall to retrieve his motorcycle. Carlo returned to retrieve the motorcycle because he believed it might attract the attention of the police. At that time, Ilona and Salvatore saw Gianni's car while they were trying to find out what happened to Ilona's boyfriend. Instead of running away, Carlo chose to eliminate all witnesses. He used a pistol with a silencer to kill Ilona and Salvatore. The prosecutor's office believed that Carlo saw himself as a professional killer who could escape justice after killing 3 young people. This mindset persisted until the next trial, but just before that date in late July 2016, Carlo admitted his guilt and revealed many details about the crime. He admitted to using air freshener to cover up the smell of decomposing corpses in the trunk of his car. He even tried to sell the car a few weeks after the murders. However, after 3 weeks, the smell became too strong to ignore, so he abandoned the car outside the city. Carlo Mercado was eventually sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. During the trial, Carlo showed no remorse. He remained calm, appearing indifferent to the proceedings. Carlo did not seek forgiveness from the victims' families. Surprisingly, he chose to waive his right to appeal, seemingly as a way of admitting his guilt for the murder of innocent young people. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Karen Newell. Sunday evening, February 20th, 1994, on a desolate rural road in Orange County, Florida, between Cocoa Beach and Orlando. A car was parked on the side of the road, and a woman was frantically waving her arms at passing vehicles. When a driver finally stopped, she pleaded for help. In the car's headlights, a man could be seen bleeding in the passenger seat. A woman named Karen Newell was trying to save her husband, John Newell, who had been shot multiple times but was still alive. Karen asked the driver for a phone and urgently called 911, screaming that her husband was dying. Within minutes, a deputy sheriff arrived, followed by police and paramedics, but it was too late for John. He needed a forensic expert, not medical assistance. He died before help could arrive, and all the doctors could do was confirm his death from multiple gunshot wounds. They immediately began communicating with Karen about the tragic situation. Karen recounted that they were attacked while returning home to Orlando after a day at the beach. On the way back, their cars started having problems that she couldn't understand. Her husband asked her to pull over to the side of the road to check the issue. As Karen got out and opened the hood, a small sedan parked right next to them. Inside were three men who looked threatening. One detail she remembered was a sticker on the rear window that said "Bad Boy." The men got out of their car without noticing Karen, who was focused on the engine. She watched as one of them approached her husband's window and demanded his wallet. Her husband refused and tried to defend himself. During the struggle, one of the attackers pulled out a gun and shot him multiple times. Afterward, the men jumped back into their car and drove away. Fortunately, Karen was unharmed. She quickly ran to John, who was bleeding. She felt helpless and couldn't do anything to save him. Karen Newell was originally from Florida and had faced a difficult life filled with cruelty since childhood. Despite these challenges, she maintained a cheerful and energetic spirit, enjoying parties and socializing with her many friends throughout high school. As she blossomed into a beautiful young woman, heads turned wherever she went, but this did not lead to a happy family life. After graduating, she experienced several unsuccessful relationships and, by her 20th birthday, had been married twice, with both marriages ending in divorce. Nevertheless, she hopeful. That spring, she focused on advancing her career. Previously, she had held various accounting jobs and worked as a nurse in a private clinic. This charming brunette even entered beauty contests, hoping to launch a modeling career, but luck was not on her side in those pursuits. One evening, she walked into a bar in one of Orlando's suburbs. There, she found a friendly stranger sitting alone with a drink. He was John, a respected local mechanic who owned a car repair shop. Just before their meeting, John had gone through a difficult breakup with his first wife, a Navy nurse who had just returned home from a long business trip. She told him she was seeing someone else, which was why he went to the bar that night. When Karen saw him, she felt an immediate attraction. Confident and outgoing, she approached him, sat down next to him, and began chatting. She discovered that he was the owner of a popular auto repair shop, young, successful, and attractive. Their brief encounter quickly developed into a passionate night. John then fell in love with Karen, and she felt the same. Their relationship flourished rapidly, and just 2 months after their intense night together, they got married on May 22, 1993. The newlyweds appeared genuinely happy, surrounded by a wave of love and joy. Shortly after their wedding, Karen's modeling prospects improved, thanks to her husband's connections and her regular participation in beauty contests. She landed a well-paying television job, leading to a busy schedule that often kept her away for several days. despite John's worries about losing Karen like he lost his first wife. She reassured him that she would never betray him. She reminded him that their sacrifices would eventually pay off, and together they dreamed of retiring in 5 years, free from work and worry. However, just a few months after their wedding, Karen discovered she was pregnant. The couple was thrilled. John's desire for a large family seemed within reach, and they continued to support each other through this exciting new chapter. A few days after Valentine's Day, they planned a weekend getaway to the beach in Florida to relax after a busy week. On February 20th, John and Karen packed their bags and drove to Cocoa Beach, located on the east side of Orlando. Known for its stunning views and excellent surfing, they spent the entire day enjoying the beach, having a barbecue, swimming, and before leaving, stopped by a surf shop to buy some gear. After that, they packed their belongings and headed home. Karen was driving because her husband had consumed some alcohol earlier and wanted to avoid losing his license. John sat in the front passenger seat. They passed through a toll booth and entered the state highway. At this time, her husband was adjusting the radio, which wasn't functioning properly. Suddenly, the car skidded slightly. Karen mentioned to her husband that the car felt odd, and she noticed a strong vibration in the steering wheel. They decided to pull over and investigate, but then the attack occurred. John was shot multiple times while sitting in the passenger seat of the car. The police conducted a detailed search for the attackers. Using Karen's testimony, they were able to create a detailed description of the car, noting one key detail, a sticker on the rear window. Karen later reported feeling unwell. She was pregnant, so emergency services rushed her to the hospital to ensure her and her baby's safety. 2.40 caliber shell casings were found near the car, indicating that the men were dangerous criminals. They were armed with at least one handgun. Surprisingly, they fled so quickly that they forgot to take the victim's wallet. Police alerted neighboring counties, notified all available patrols, and warned drivers of passing cars. Checkpoints were set up, with officers carefully monitoring vehicles. Initially, attention was focused on cars with bad boy stickers. However, no drivers reported seeing such a car, and it did not pass through the checkpoints. In the ambulance, Karen answered all the necessary questions about the incident. However, the health of the Karen and child was the main priority at that time. After being examined at the hospital, doctors confirmed that the Karen was in stable condition. She was able to speak with police officers later that same day. Karen provided a detailed account of the events. She explained that they were not alone on the beach. A friend from work, Peter, joined them shortly after they arrived at Cocoa Beach. The three of them spent most of the day together, and at the end of the day, they drove back to Orlando in 2 separate cars. Peter drove his own car while Karen followed him closely behind. After passing the toll booth, Peter drove ahead and quickly vanished from view. Soon after, Karen's car began to vibrate. Her husband insisted they stop immediately to check the car's condition. Karen got out of the driver's seat and opened the hood. Suddenly, she heard the screech of brakes as a stranger's car pulled up near theirs. Just seconds later, gunfire erupted. In that moment, Karen crouched down to hide under the open hood. She overheard the attackers, dressed in black and white, demanding her husband's wallet. Then, several loud shots rang out, and the criminals fled the scene. She noticed that the robbers didn't take the wallet, but she couldn't see their faces. The police arrived quickly and began investigating the scene, exploring various possibilities. Some unusual aspects caught their attention, raising doubts about Karen's statement. First, no one reported seeing a car marked Bad Boy. Second, it seemed odd that the robbers, who were after a wallet for money, would leave abruptly and forget their loot after committing murder. Third, they overlooked the woman and didn't check why the car's hood was open. Finally, it was odd that John, a mechanic, didn't check under the hood himself, while the one checking the car was Karen, who didn't know much about cars. The police did not charge Karen with fraud. Instead, they chose to gather more details about the case. The police quickly found some interesting information, specifically a report from 3 months earlier in Orlando. It turned out that an assault had occurred at Karen's home. According to the couple's previous statements, at around 9 p.m., Karen heard a noise in their backyard. She told her husband about it and asked him to check it out. When John went outside, he encountered 2 masked men. The neighbor quickly left the house when he heard the noise, and the porch light suddenly turned on, scaring the attackers, so they ran away. John returned home and told his wife what had happened, and she called the rescue service. John was not seriously injured, but he had a lot of bruises. John had no valuable information that could help catch the criminals, since he could not see their faces. After a brief and unsuccessful search, John's family's case was declared unsolved. John believed that he had interrupted the robbers, leading to their attack on his home. However, things now seemed more serious. He may have inadvertently made enemies, and they had come back to destroy him. This also explained why they did not take his wallet. Their goal was never to steal, but to kill him. The police started investigating all the people that John might have had conflicts with recently. John ran a successful business, raising the question of whether competitors could resort to extreme actions. Most of John's friends and acquaintances were unaware of any conflicts. John was known to be a kind and non-confrontational person, never speaking about any unpleasant situations that might cause resentment towards him. Everyone agreed that he was always willing to help others. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that John's kind nature may have contributed to the tragedy. Police discovered that shortly before the attack, a stranger had appeared in John's backyard. He was identified as Peter, a friend of Karen's who had recently gone on vacation with their family John. Peter's apartment had been broken into, forcing him to seek temporary housing. Karen convinced John to allow Peter to stay in her home for a while to support him during this difficult time. Peter is an attractive young man with blonde hair and blue eyes. After new discoveries in the investigation, there is growing suspicion that Karen has feelings for Peter, and that Peter is likely the father of the child. It is possible that the couple planned to eliminate John in order to benefit financially from their relationship. Peter, who had a close relationship with Karen, became a suspect in the murder investigation. He was brought to the police station for questioning. During the interview, Peter's account matched what Karen had said. He confirmed that he had gone to Cocoa Beach with Karen's family and spent time there with them, drinking beer and smoking marijuana. That evening, he drove away after passing through a checkpoint, not waiting for Karen's family because he was on his way home to Port St. Lucie. Overall, his story was consistent with Karen's account. He provided detailed information about his background to counter any claims about an affair with Karen. At that moment, it became clear that Karen had lied. She had claimed that Peter was an assistant producer at a TV channel where she worked, but that was false. In reality, Peter did not have a steady job. He had dropped out of school and occasionally did part-time work like mowing lawns. This allowed him to make enough money to get by, but he was not involved in any television work. Police learned from Peter's friends that Karen had been having an affair with Peter, which began a few months before he moved into John's house. During this time, Peter often bragged about his relationship with a married woman and often shared the story of how they met. It was later revealed that Karen had used business trips as an excuse to spend time with Peter. At the time, Karen was 29 and Peter was 18. While Karen kept the relationship a secret, she often visited him in the city, where they enjoyed days together and spent John's money. They met by chance while driving on the highway. The Karen caught his attention with her handcuff keychain hanging from her rearview mirror. When they stopped at a traffic light, He happily stuck his hands out the window as if they were handcuffed. To his surprise, she smiled back and they began flirting. After their first meeting, they spent the night together on the beach. His friends noticed that Peter was very fond of Karen. He even talked seriously about marrying her and was convinced that she might be pregnant with his child. The couple had a clear motive for killing John. However, at this stage of the investigation, there was no concrete evidence to confirm their involvement. The first step was to locate the murder weapon. A .22 caliber pistol was found at the crime scene. Police are looking for witnesses who may know about Peter and Karen's weapons. They interviewed one of the Karen's ex-husbands, who revealed that Peter was not Karen's only sexual partner. She often meets with her ex in various hotels. In November 1993, she approached him with an unusual request to borrow a .22 caliber pistol for self-defense, claiming she felt threatened after two strangers attacked John. He believed her and provided her with the weapon, which raised suspicions. It is necessary to locate the pistol and conduct ballistics testing to determine whether John was shot with this gun. When the police asked Karen's ex-husband about the weapon, he reported that she had not yet returned it. This raised the police's suspicions about Karen's involvement in her husband's death. As they investigated her background, they discovered that she was on probation at the time. In the 1980s, Karen had been convicted of credit card forgery and large-scale theft. Because of her probation status, she was not allowed to possess the weapon given to her by her ex-husband. Consequently, just 8 days after John's death, Karen was arrested for violating her probation, which meant she would remain in custody until the investigation was finished. Police quickly received crucial evidence just 2 days after the arrest. They interviewed Louis Aragon, Karen's half-brother. Louis had a criminal history. In the summer of 1993, Karen approached him with a proposition. Her husband had a $500,000 life insurance policy, and Karen wanted him to help eliminate John. In exchange, she promised him a large payout. However, despite the tempting offer, Louis refused to participate in the murder. In November, Peter and Karen planned to brutally beat John in their yard over a money dispute. Fortunately, a neighbor intervened in time and scared the attackers away, which angered Karen, who had begun to plan how to get rid of her troublesome husband. Key to the investigation was the testimony of her half-brother, Louis. He revealed that Karen had approached him just days after the first attack and tried to convince him to participate in a second murder, but he had refused. Peter, however, was willing to do anything for Karen. As Thanksgiving approached in 1993, Karen convinced her husband to allow Peter to live with them. The police needed to verify the truthfulness of their new witness. They started by reviewing the couple's insurance policies. They discovered that Karen had taken out a life insurance policy on her husband for $250,000, which was stored in his safe. Over time, she acquired several additional policies, totaling around $500,000, a significant sum at that time. It appeared that her greed led her to eliminate her husband in order to collect the insurance payouts. Karen was determined to receive the money. In the days following John's death, she contacted various insurance companies, and some had already issued her compensation by the time of the investigation. However, the largest payments were on hold, prompting Karen to visit multiple insurance companies to demand her money. Meanwhile, on March 28, 1994, Peter was arrested as well. Both were charged with John Newell's murder. The prosecutor's office alleges that from the beginning, Karen began her relationship with John with the intention of receiving his insurance money. After getting married, she quickly took out a $250,000 life insurance policy and continued to purchase smaller policies. However, she did not directly participate in any crimes. Instead, she manipulated Peter and convinced him that they would marry and have a child together, portraying her husband, John, as an obstacle to their future. After the murder, a pregnancy test was conducted and it was found that she was not pregnant. She had an IUD, preventing any possibility of pregnancy at the time. Karen was fully aware of this. It was clear that her claim of being pregnant was simply a manipulation tactic to control the men around her. Given her deceitful nature, the prosecutor's office was aiming for the death penalty. And Peter was also facing the death penalty. So it was easy to get a confession by offering a deal. The plea agreement included cross-examination, during which Peter quickly admitted to having an affair with Karen. He claimed that they had been intimate at every meeting. She had won his heart. Peter revealed that it was Karen who had suggested attacking John in his apartment. When that plan failed, Karen began planning a more elaborate crime. As soon as Peter got out of the car, he pointed a gun at John's head and fired 3 more bullets into John's chest. Peter then dumped the gun in a lake several miles from the crime scene. Divers were able to recover the gun, and ballistics tests confirmed that it was the same gun that had shot John Newell. Additionally, the gun's serial number matched the serial number registered to Karen's ex-husband. In exchange for this crucial information, Peter was offered a plea deal for second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder. During the preliminary hearing, it was clear that Karen's lawyers were determined to fight hard. They tried to blame Peter, arguing that he was the mastermind behind the crime, motivated by jealousy over. Karen was portrayed as an innocent victim caught in the love triangle. If Karen was not involved in planning the murder, then how did Peter get the gun that her ex-husband owned? She never gave a satisfactory explanation for this. In addition, Peter and Karen's ex-husband did not know each other. The ex-husband even confirmed that Karen asked him for a gun. On September 5, 1994, Peter was sentenced to a long prison term with the possibility of parole, and he was released in early January 2010. And Karen Newell was sentenced to life in prison. She complained that it was unfair that Peter, who pulled the trigger, received a lighter sentence than she. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Donald Mellon. Donald Mellon grew up in a loving environment, enjoying a happy childhood in a wealthy family that owned a McDonald's in the western suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona. He was financially well off and attracted many girls, but he longed for a real family. He shunned superficial relationships and fleeting encounters. Eventually, he met his first love, Karen Dawson. Their relationship initially portrayed an ideal picture of a happy family, where Donald was a loving father and family man who was adored by his 3 daughters. He, along with his wife Karen and their children, enjoyed a comfortable life together. However, over the years, Donald developed problems with alcohol. Despite the impact on his family, he refused to seek help or stop drinking, eventually leading Karen to make the difficult decision to divorce him. This loneliness changed Donald dramatically. His old self seemed to have disappeared completely. He now sported exotic tattoos and spent his time partying at clubs, frequenting a strip club on Bourbon Street. As a regular, the club manager introduced him to Rebecca, a 23-year-old girl who had recently arrived from Nebraska. After escaping an abusive marriage, she is looking for a fresh start with her young son. Rebecca was born in Newport Beach, California, but spent most of her childhood in Omaha, Nebraska. She describes her childhood as being in a very religious household. As she entered her teens, Rebecca recounted experiences of being molested by men. She felt a lack of closeness with her parents and experienced rejection throughout her adolescence. At one point, she was placed in the custody of the Nebraska Child Welfare Department and moved between different foster homes. This sense of loneliness followed her throughout her life. When Rebecca expressed her desire to leave Omaha, her ex-boyfriend reacted violently, throwing her across the room. She was often bruised, and when she hinted at wanting to leave, he threatened her with a gun. Feeling that her life was in danger, she decided that she could no longer stay with her abusive boyfriend. One night, she escaped and ran away to Minnesota. At a cheap motel, an employee suggested that she move to Arizona, praising the beauty of the place. Rebecca really wanted to go to this place, but she decided to wait until a better time. Rebecca found a job as a sales clerk at a shopping mall, where she met a young man and they quickly got engaged in Las Vegas. He was 19 and she was 18. Their love grew stronger, and soon after, she gave birth to a son. However, their happy story took a turn for the worse. After her husband quit his job, Rebecca faced more hardships. To support her family, she began dancing at nightclubs. Fate brought Rebecca to a strip club, where she earned a good income and was able to support her family, while a nanny looked after her son. However, returning home after work was difficult because her husband, an unemployed and often drunk man, not only relied on her but also often insulted her. Eventually, Rebecca decided to leave her husband. She confided in one of her wealthy regular clients about her situation, and he gave her $20,000 to help her escape to Arizona. To protect herself, she gave a photo of her husband to the bouncers at the club, instructing them not to let him in or reveal her whereabouts. She relocated to a new apartment in East Phoenix and switched to a different nightclub. There, she met Donald. Initially, Donald wasn't fond of Rebecca, but over time, Donald became deeply infatuated with her. He loved her so much that he was willing to welcome her and her 11-year-old son into his life. However, Donald's daughters disapproved of Rebecca, believing she had a negative effect on their father. Despite their concerns, Rebecca moved in with Donald in October 2003, and they married 2 years later. Everything seemed fine until 6 months later when problems began to emerge. Rebecca, now 36, developed an alcohol addiction, influenced by her husband. Together, they drank continuously, neglecting meals. On July 31, 2012, around 10 p.m., a visibly intoxicated Rebecca called the police. She was slurring her speech and requested an ambulance for her husband, who she claimed was bleeding heavily. The police and paramedics quickly arrived at the scene to assist Donald but were taken aback by the situation. Rebecca sat calmly on the couch with a cigarette in her hand, while Donald lay bleeding on the floor beside her. As the paramedics worked on Donald, the police observed Rebecca with growing suspicion. Her apparent indifference to her husband's serious condition raised questions. They also noticed a gun protruding from beneath the pillows next to the dog and a bullet hole in the frame of her wedding portrait on the wall. In light of these findings, the police decided to take Rebecca into custody. When police questioned Rebecca about what happened, she claimed that she couldn't remember the details regarding Donald. She stated that she had just left her room when she saw him bleeding on the floor, and she immediately called 911. After answering a few more questions, she unexpectedly fell asleep during the interrogation. Donald died in the hospital a few hours later, prompting the police to start a murder investigation. Before detectives could proceed, Donald's daughters discovered that he had left a voicemail at 2:44 p.m. In the message, he asked them to call him back, and they heard a loud bang just as the message was sent. The daughters were shocked and confused when they learned of their father's death from the police. They were heartbroken to learn that these were their father's last words. After receiving their first lead, the police started investigating the crime scene and were taken aback to discover that CCTV cameras were monitoring the house. What shocked them even more was that the entire murder of Donald was captured on video. Rebecca was left alone with Donald after her son went to sleep at a friend's house. She picked up a gun and entered the living room while Donald was recording a voice message for his daughter. He was unaware of her presence until she fired the first shot. The bullet grazed his head and struck Rebecca's wedding portrait. In surprise and pain, he screamed and fell to the floor next to the couch. Rebecca returned to her room and changed into a t-shirt. She then returned to the living room and shot her husband, Donald, in the head. As blood poured across the room, she sat on the couch next to him as he died. She lit a cigarette and watched him bleed for 23 minutes before finally calling 911. The scene was so horrific that the footage was never made public. Surveillance videos clearly showed that it was a cold-blooded murder. When questioned, her story kept changing. Eventually, she claimed that Donald was planning to hire someone to kill her and make it look like a robbery gone wrong. On July 31st, while Donald was on the phone, Rebecca overheard the plan he was discussing. In a state of panic, she grabbed the gun, went into the living room, and fired, but she could not remember what happened after that. As police dug deeper into their story, they uncovered disturbing details about the couple's circumstances. Their home was filled with excessive drinking, creating an unhealthy atmosphere for raising children. The Rebecca expressed concern for her teenage son, who witnessed everything. Together, Donald and Rebecca were on a path of self-destruction, amassing not only alcohol but also a frightening collection of weapons. They seemed to drink constantly, leading to a concerning situation. Friends revealed that Donald had been controlling of Rebecca from the beginning of their relationship. He pressured her to quit her job at a strip club. He also frequently criticized and insulted her. He even forced Rebecca to get a tattoo of his name, claiming it was a way to mark her. In April 2006, after a night of drinking at a bar, Rebecca and Donald got into an argument that escalated into a physical fight. Donald began to violently beat Rebecca. A deputy sheriff from a neighboring county happened to witness the incident and decided to follow them, calling the police for assistance. The deputy reported seeing Rebecca trying to escape from Donald, who then approached her and struck her on the head. Rebecca fell to the ground, and Donald subsequently grabbed her and attempted to take her to a waiting taxi. At that moment, the police intervened and detained them. Rebecca had a bloody nose, scratches on her lips, and blood stains on her shirt. When the officer attempted to photograph her injuries, she turned away and gave him the middle finger. Although the officer witnessed the incident, Rebecca defended her husband, insisting that he had done nothing wrong and that she had simply tripped and fallen. She told the police they were wasting their time and that she would not leave him. Donald had a small cut on his cheek and around his right eye. He told the officer that he and Rebecca were having a normal conversation. He denied it was an argument, claiming she turned to face him and tripped, causing her face to hit his. Donald was arrested on assault charges but was released shortly afterward. He also denied any wrongdoing. In December 2006, police were called to the Donald home shortly after midnight by someone who reported a domestic dispute. The caller mentioned an argument between the couple, during which Donald broke a pool table and knocked it over. A witness noted that the couple frequently had arguments that became violent. When the officers arrived, they found the couple arguing in the dressing room. Donald was standing over her, yelling, while she sat on the floor in tears. The Rebecca refused to explain why she was crying and even declined to give the police her name. She yelled at the officers to leave her house, which led to her arrest on suspicion of obstructing justice. By March 2011, the Donald had relocated to West Phoenix. The police arrived after someone triggered the alarm. Donald informed the police that his wife had injured her face. He was unsure who activated the alarm but suspected it was the dog. In the bedroom, the officers spoke with Rebecca, who gave her name. She looked at a female officer and whispered, "Help me." As is routine, the officers began asking questions to assess her situation. After a brief conversation, the officers concluded that Rebecca was in danger and arrested her husband on suspicion of domestic violence. When the officers told Rebecca that her husband had been arrested, she became angry and said, "You don't know what you just did to me," Rebecca cried, "He's going to kill me." The officers offered to take her to a relative's house or a shelter, but she refused. They left a domestic violence flyer on her bed before leaving. In the summer of 2012, Rebecca told her psychologist that her husband had become extremely paranoid and suspected that she was plotting against him. By that time, the Donald were living in a $400,000 home in the Willa area of downtown Phoenix. Rebecca mentioned that Donald had changed the locks, and only he had a key. She also noted that he had installed cameras throughout the house to monitor her. A subsequent investigation revealed that the surveillance camera system had been installed after their home had been burglarized, with cameras positioned both inside and outside the property. In late July 2012, Rebecca decided she wanted to leave her husband. She claimed he had broken her iPod, damaged her phone, and locked her inside the house. During a session with a psychologist, she expressed feeling trapped and hopeless. On the night of July 31, 2012, they hosted former neighbors with whom they had a good relationship. The neighbors noticed Rebecca was drinking heavily and voiced their concerns before leaving, which upset her husband. Rebecca claimed that she and her husband had argued that night. She said he threw her across the room, leaving her scared and having to reach for a weapon. The incident was not caught on surveillance cameras, however. Police discovered footage that showed multiple instances of violence, both from Donald and sometimes from Rebecca. Their relationship was tumultuous, marked by intense emotions, conflict, and years of violent arguments. Surveillance cameras captured multiple instances of Donald pushing Rebecca to the ground, hitting her on the head, and occasionally choking her. On one occasion, he even grabbed her legs and threw her into the pool. After her arrest, Rebecca claimed she acted in self-defense. But it was clear that Rebecca had fired the shots. In a reduced sentence, Rebecca pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. During her trial, she admitted that she had been drinking that night and could not remember what happened afterward. While he lay bleeding, she sat and calmly smoked a cigarette. Moreover, the trial revealed undeniable evidence. A video of the incident was shown in court, leading the jury to convict Rebecca of first-degree murder. She received a life sentence in prison, with the possibility of parole in 20 years, making her eligible for release in 2032. After her sentence was announced, Rebecca expressed her sorrow. Rebecca was escorted out of the courtroom, trying to approach her son while repeatedly telling him that she loved him. She kept her eyes on her son until the door closed behind her. Custody of her son was granted to his maternal grandmother. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Tyale Palmer. Tyale Palmer was a 12-year-old girl with her whole future ahead of her. She was an ordinary teenager, but her life ended tragically. She became a victim of terrible violence. Her mother took her to the Child Protection Center, fearing for her life because of her abusive father. The mother believed this decision would safeguard her daughter and provide her with a better future. The mother genuinely believed she was making the right decision. Her mother herself is also suffering from domestic violence. She did not want her daughter to experience the same. She was unable to raise Tyale properly due to the family's difficult circumstances. Tyale became a troubled child, little girl frequently running away from home to escape the conflicts between her parents and often resorting to vagrancy. In January 2015, Tyale, a 12-year-old girl, was placed by the Child Protection Center with a new family in an area outside Chambers Flat, about 40 minutes from Brisbane, Australia. This is a quiet, cozy place with a population of about 2,500 people. Her adoptive family was the Thorburns, consisting of Rick, his wife Julene, and their sons. The eldest son, Joshua, was 19, and the youngest, Trent, was 18. Previously, Tyale had been adopted by several families, but because she had a complex personality, not all adoptive parents were able to care for her. Some considered her quite contentious. The Thorburns were no different. Tyale was unhappy about living with two teenage boys much older than her, Trent and Joshua, but she had no choice. At that time, her adoptive parents, Rick and Julene, had been married for over 25 years. Rick, a former truck driver, had to switch to lighter transport jobs due to a serious back injury. He started a fast food business from a van and also owned a horse farm. Julene ran a home daycare. The family was regarded as very decent and exemplary in the area, which is why Child Protection Services chose them for Tyale. Within 4 months, Tyale appeared to have settled into her new family and continued living with them until the unfortunate incident that followed. She attended Marsden State High School, just a 20-minute drive from home. Her life seemed to be improving. It seemed that everyone in the Thorburn family have gotten used to her and they got along very well. However, not everything was as perfect as it seemed. October 30th, 2015 started out like any other normal day for the Thorburn family. Rick took his adopted daughter Tyale to school and then returned home to work. A few hours later, he received a call from the school informing him that Tyale hadn't attended class. This wasn't the first time she had run away. She had a difficult childhood and was used to avoiding her problems in this way. However, this time they could not find her. Unlike previous instances where she usually returned on her own or was found. Then, Rick made a post on social media explaining the situation and asking anyone who knew Tyale's whereabouts to contact him. But no one responded. The Thorburn family knew Tyale was excited about Halloween and had already prepared a costume, so it was unusual when she disappeared just before the holiday. Concerned, they contacted the police, and the teenager was reported missing. However, no one tried to find the little girl, because it was assumed that she would return on her own. Less than a week later, on the morning of November 5, 2015, a local fisherman made a distressing call to the police. He had discovered a body in the reeds in the shallow waters of the Pimpama River, about 30 kilometers south of where the girl was last seen. By this time, the body was badly decomposed, likely due to local wildlife and the typical climate of the area. The police officers at the scene were unable to determine the sex or identity of the body, but they believed it was a teenager. The body was severely damaged, wearing only underwear, and was sent for autopsy. Following forensic examination and comparison with missing persons in the area, the police suspected it was 12-year-old Tyale, who had gone missing a week prior. This was later confirmed through DNA analysis. Experts concluded that the initial suspected animal bites were actually inflicted by a person, shows that Tyale suffered brutal abuse. The case was reclassified as murder and an investigation began. As Rick was the last person to see her alive, so law enforcement focused on investigating him. His behavior and inconsistent testimony raised suspicions, but required thorough investigation and evidence to prove. Investigators decided to interview the rest of the Thorburn family to see if they had any more information. However, after questioning the family members, they were unable to gather any useful information. Everyone corroborated Rick's account that he had dropped Tyale off at school, but no one had seen her since. The investigators then visited the school to verify Thorburn family's story, and there, they were able to collect more valuable information. After interviewing over 100 people, including all the students in Tyale's class and her teachers, it became clear that no one had seen her that day. She was not seen in class or anywhere near the school. A review of the school's surveillance footage from that day revealed that she did not come to school and was not seen at the entrance, which was unexpected. This raised the question, where had she gone? However, some students, including Tyale's friends, came forward to report that she was dealing with major problems. One of her friends even told the family that Tyale had pleaded to be taken out of the Thorburn family home because she felt mistreated and was worried about getting into grave danger. Sadly, Tyale's life ended in a horrific manner. After speaking with other students, the police determined that Tyale had no enemies and there was no one else who could have harmed her. As a result, suspicions about the Foster family, the Thorburns, grew. However, when questioned, the family members strongly denied any allegations of domestic violence, they claiming that Tyale is a person who is very fond of making up stories and in the past she often ran away from foster families. The police then checked this information and found evidence that Tyale usually run away from home. This led them to believe that she was a troubled teenager prone to fabricating stories. All those close to the Thorburn family, including neighbors, confirmed that they were an exemplary family who ran a private kindergarten where many people sent their children. And no one believed that such kind people could do something terrible to their adopted daughter. As a result, the police began searching for other clues to Tyale's murder, they believing that she may have fabricated a story about being mistreated, just as she had done before. Then the girl ran away and unfortunately became a victim of an attack. As a result, the police had no reason to suspect the Thorburns and instead, they focused their investigation on finding another motive for the murder. The Thorburn family continued to operate their kindergarten at home while the investigation was ongoing. Detectives have questioned about 300 sex offenders in the area. They hope to find clues to Tyale's murder. However, even this extensive inquiry failed to yield any clues. Most of they had alibis, and some no longer lived in the area, making it impossible to identify suspects from this list. On December 4, 2015, a vital piece of evidence was found near the site where the body was discovered. Tyale's shoes and backpack, which she used for school, were recovered about 100 meters away. This case drew widespread public attention. The story was extensively covered on various Australian TV channels, so gradually the whole country knew about this case. Several rallies were held before the funeral, with people demanding justice for the girl's tragic and undeserved death. Tyale's biological mother organized the rallies and publicly sought answers from the police about her daughter's death. She also appeared on television to raise awareness and express her outrage over the failure of Child Protective Services to safeguard her daughter. The public's response was overwhelming, with over 600 people attending the girl's funeral on November 14, despite many not knowing her personally. Mourners wore white and purple t-shirts with hearts and Tyale's name, as purple was her favorite color. The coffin was adorned with about 400 white roses, and purple balloons were released into the sky as the hearse departed for a private cremation. It's been 5 months since Tyale's murder, but police still have no new leads. A substantial reward of 250,000 Australian dollars, equivalent to approximately 160,000 US dollars, was offered for any information that could aid in the case. Tyale's mother made a heartfelt appeal on television, pleading for eyewitnesses to come forward and for those responsible to confess. The police also guaranteed immunity from prosecution for any accomplice who did not directly commit the crime and was the first to provide information. Despite these efforts, no new leads were uncovered. Police received a number of calls from a number of individuals, but none provided any valuable information. As the summer of 2016 arrived, the police have yet to find the main suspect. Detectives interviewed numerous individuals with a history of sexual violence, but the advanced decomposition of Tyale's body at the time of discovery had destroyed any forensic evidence, leaving investigators uncertain about the cause of death. The only lead in the case was a hyoid bone fracture, suggesting that Tyale was strangled. Initially, police suspected that the abduction occurred near the school, where the girl was dropped off by her parents in an area not covered by CCTV cameras. This theory was based on the lack of surveillance footage. A reward of 250,000 Australian dollars was offered for information leading to the capture of the perpetrator, but it remained unclaimed. A breakthrough came in May 2016, when the State Police Department received an anonymous tip after 6 months of investigation. The caller claimed to have information about the girl, Tyale, and her foster family, Thorburn family. According to the anonymous witness, Thorburn family had been seeking a child with behavioral issues to care for, which would entitle them to increased benefits. The family's interest in Tyale was allegedly purely financial, and they don't have any other feelings for little girl. The informant also suggested that all members of the Thorburn family might have been involved in Tyale's disappearance. Unfortunately, the caller ended the conversation without providing further details, and their identity remains unknown. In connection with the phone call, the police revisited the possibility that Thorburn family was involved in the murder. Initially, they received reports from Tyale's classmates of domestic violence at the Thorburn home, but these claims were unverified. However, after the anonymous call, detectives decided to re-question Thorburn family some of Tyale's classmates. One of Tyale's friends revealed that she had a romantic relationship with 19-year-old Trent, the youngest son of Thorburn family. Due to her age, Taylor didn't fully understand the situation and believed they were in a genuine relationship, as Trent had led her to believe. She developed feelings for him and enjoyed the horses on the farm, but she was also intimidated by Trent and the rest of the family, so she wanted to run away from them. It is likely that Tyale suffered not only sexual violence but also physical abuse within the Thorburn household. Although Tyale's friend's testimony needs further investigation, repeated questioning of the Thorburn family members yielded no results. They continued to deny all allegations, particularly those related to the abuse of a minor. Nevertheless, due to the serious suspicions surrounding the family, the authorities revoked their permission to operate a kindergarten and suspended their foster care license. Law enforcement officers installed listening devices in the Thorburn family's home. They uncovering shocking information that tarnished the family's decent image. The family members were extremely supportive of each other. Through the listening devices, it was discovered that on October 29, 2015, the family held a meeting, just a day before Tyale went missing. During this meeting, Trent informed his parents that Tyale had been having unusual stomach pains. This makes them worried and suspicious about Tyale, a 12-year-old girl, having an unwanted pregnancy. The Thorburn family had become aware of the intimate relationship between Trent and Tyale shortly before her disappearance. It was revealed that he had been having intercourse with the girl when no one was home. The wiretapping also exposed that Trent had repeatedly had intercourse with she over a period of about 10 months, nearly the entire time the girl was in their care. When they suspected Tyale was pregnant, Trent turned to his parents, worried that their relationship would be exposed. However, Rick reassured his son that he would handle the problem. Judging by the conversations among the Thorburn family members, Tyale was terrified of her father, Rick. Her fear was not unfounded, as the rest of the family also seemed to fear Rick's. Despite appearing to be a decent family man, but he was hiding a cruel and sinister personality. One evening, after a family discussion, Rick forced all the family members, except Tyale, to leave the house. When they returned a couple of hours later, Tyale was missing. Rick claimed she had run away and that the problems with her were now solved. However, his confidence that she would keep quiet made the rest of his family suspicious, that he might have harmed or even killed her. When Trent tried to check her room, Rick forbade it and made a threatening gesture. The family was too intimidated to contradict Rick, and they eventually dropped the matter. It later became clear that Rick's story about dropping off Tyale at school was false. In reality, she was likely no longer alive by that time. However, what exactly happened to her remained a mystery. Detectives monitoring the family's conversations overheard Rick instructing others on what to say and do to avoid arousing police suspicion, and they obediently followed his instructions. Initially, police called Julian and their children, Trent and Joshua, in for questioning, believing they would be the easiest to get information from. As the police disclosed the information they had, family members began to give testimony. The detectives gradually pieced together what had happened at their house. Rick had set everything up as though he was protecting his family. However, after thoroughly reviewing footage from the school's external CCTV cameras, the police realized that Rick had carefully attempted to conceal his crime and mislead the detectives. For example, he had indeed driven towards the school, as his car appeared on several CCTV cameras. However, none of the footage showed Tyler getting out of the car. Afterwards, a storm of criticism and suspicion fell on the Thorburn family. Julene and Joshua charged with giving false testimony and trying to mislead the investigation. Trent, involved in violence, faced charges of first-degree murder and was similarly accused of attempting to confuse the investigation. Detectives believed he killed Tyler and tampered with her body to hinder forensic identification. This initially made determining her gender difficult. Fortunately, DNA testing made identification possible, revealing Trent likely hadn't considered this method existed. Law enforcement officers had strong reasons to suspect that Rick was involved in severe physical and sexual abuse of Tyler. A total of 9 charges were filed against him. Trent faced charges of incest and giving false testimony. The family car, sold soon after Tyler's disappearance, was seized and inspected. Blood stains were found, which worsened Rick's health. He fainted when detained, and his condition became so severe in custody that doctors had to place him in an artificial coma. After a few days in the hospital, Rick regained consciousness. Doctors believed he might have intentionally caused his condition by taking medication. However, Rick could not evade responsibility for his crimes, and the Thorburn family was brought to court one after another. During the trial, Julene and Joshua admitted their guilt for all charges and agreed to testify against Trent and Rick. The jury quickly concluded that the entire Thorburn family was guilty of monstrous acts, though each member was guilty on different counts. Joshua was sentenced to 3 months in prison. His mother, Julene, received a sentence of 1.5 years. Trent, who pleaded guilty to perjury, incest, and attempted obstruction of justice, was sentenced to 4 years. All of them, including Trent, who raped Tyler, are now free. Trent was released on January 19, 2018, after serving only 16 months. The most brutal figure in this case, Rick, confessed during the trial to Tyler's murder, hiding her body to protect his son and family's reputation. He received a life sentence in May 2018, with eligibility for parole after 20 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Carrie Farver. In 2012, Dave Kropa, 34, moved to Omaha, Nebraska to start managing an auto repair shop he had recently inherited. Shortly before this, he separated from his wife, Amy Flora. They have 2 children together, and for the sake of their children, they remain on good terms and see each other regularly. Dave is trying to find a new woman to date, so he created profiles on several dating sites. He is friendly, sociable, and easygoing, so there are many people who want to meet him and want to start a relationship with him. At that time, he did not want a long-term or serious relationship, and he was content to enjoy fun moments with women. On an autumn day in 2012, Carrie Farver visited Dave's auto repair shop to have her car checked. Carrie was a 37-year-old, single mother. She has a 14-year-old son, and he is aiming to become a programmer in the future. When Dave met her, he was instantly infatuated with her and asked her out on a date. But she declined, saying he wasn't her type. However, he was captivated by she and wanted to get her attention. He later found her online and sent her a message. Although she didn't respond immediately, she eventually replied, and they started communicating. When she returned to the repair shop for more work on her car, he invited her to dinner again, and this time, she accepted. Carrie was a very cheerful, independent, and energetic woman. In school, she was among the top students, and teachers believed she had a promising future. Carrie was close to her mother, dear friends, and acquaintances. She always wore a smile and never gave up, no matter the situation. However, her life changed significantly at age 22 when she became pregnant by her boyfriend. Her boyfriend didn't like this and he refused to take responsibility for raising the child. This didn't deter she, though. She quickly decided to keep the baby, become a single mother, and will not depend on boyfriend. She paused her university studies to find a job. She then moved into an apartment near her mother, Nancy. She also graduated from college and eventually got a job in IT with a higher salary. Being a mother came naturally to her, and her life revolved around her son, Max, and she chose not to pursue new relationships, dedicating herself entirely to her child. Dave's first date with Carrie went very well, and she was delighted about their time together. She later shared with a friend on social media that she hadn't laughed so much in years. Their conversation flowed freely and naturally, as if they had known each other for a long time, and Carrie was eager to continue the relationship. Furthermore, Dave also wants to build a romantic relationship with she. He even confessed that he was in love with her. He decided to stop talking to others on dating sites for her. However, before Dave met Carrie, he knew another woman named Shauna Elizabeth Gollier, who went by Liz. She was the first person he met online after divorcing his wife. He found her to be a sweet and cheerful person. Both had children around the same age, and she expressed interest in having an open relationship, similar to Dave's desire. She managed a small business and took care of housework. They felt very compatible, so they saw each other regularly for the past 6 months, maintaining a sexual relationship. Over time, Liz became more and more difficult. She wanted to spend more and more time with Dave. However, he doesn't like it, and he would rather communicate with other women. This causes their relationship to deteriorate and he begins to distance himself from her. However, Liz kept interfering in his life, often giving him unsolicited advice, which stressed him out. Liz also knew that he had been dating different women before he met Carrie. She felt very dissatisfied with all the women he dated. Dave wanted to break up with his girlfriend, Liz, and suggested she date other people. However, she refused to break up and has deleted her dating website. She became jealous of other women, including Carrie, and even of Dave's kids and ex-wife. As a result, he frequently had to reassure her. During a date with Carrie, Dave noticed missed calls and texts from Liz. Liz insisted on entering his apartment immediately because she forgot something there during her last visit. Dave told her he was with his girlfriend and couldn't let her in right then, but he can do it after he gets home. However, Liz kept pressing him to let her in, claiming she urgently needed her belongings. In the end, Dave agreed. He and Carrie returned to his place. When they entered the house, Liz showed up, pounding on the door and angrily demanding entry. Of course, this situation clearly ruined their evening, but Carrie sympathized. She suggested that Dave resolve the issue with Liz first, then they could go to her house where they wouldn't be bothered. And they did just that. Dave opened the door, returned Liz's items. Then he and Carrie left together. Carrie's trip back to Macedonia, Iowa, took about an hour. In the morning, she told Dave she was happy with their current relationship arrangement. She didn't want a serious relationship, marriage, or children. She just wanted to enjoy their time together. This understanding brought them closer, as they shared similar views on relationships. Their relationship thrives on mutual understanding. Dave found she very attractive, smart, and charming. Over the next 2 weeks, they saw each other every day. Even though she lives in a neighboring city in another state, but she still visits him during the day to have lunch or spend time together. She often stayed overnight. She had a high-paying job, holding a key position in a large IT company. She dedicated most of her time to work and her son, leaving only a small portion for leisure. This perfectly aligned with Dave's lifestyle. In early November, Dave started considering whether to change his main rule and move in with Carrie. Around the same time, while in Thailand, Carrie received several friend requests on social media from strangers. She noticed one request came from someone in her hometown of Macedonia. She sent a message asking if they knew each other, but never got a reply. This felt odd, so she told Dave, but they didn't think much of it. On November 13, 2012, Dave woke up early and saw Carrie working on her laptop, finishing edits on a new project she was set to present to management that day. She kissed him goodbye and left, planning to meet him again in the evening. During the day, Dave got a message from Carrie asking if he wanted to move in with her. This was surprising because just a few days earlier, they had agreed not to live together but to continue their relationship casually. Although Dave had been considering the idea, but he felt uncomfortable with this, so he politely declined. He reminded Carrie of their previous discussion to keep things as they were for now. However, the other person responded with a barrage of insults, showing outright hatred for him. The messages were filled with hysterical threats, indicating that the relationship with his dream woman was likely over. Dave was stunned by her words and didn't recognize the person he loved. Consequently, he cut off all communication, went home after work, and noticed that none of Carrie's belongings were there. He assumed she had broken up with him and taken all her belongings with her. A few days later, police officers arrived at the auto repair shop where Dave worked. They informed him that his girlfriend, Carrie, was missing. Dave was the last person to see her alive. He had kissed her goodbye in the morning before she left for work, but she never arrived there. Since then, no one had been able to reach her. Dave told the investigators he had no idea what had happened to Carrie and shared their last messages. He explained that she had communicated with him in a very rude manner that day. Upset by her tone, he ended their conversation. This later troubled him as he wondered if it was truly Carrie, who was always polite, sending such messages. Detectives then spoke with Carrie's relatives, piecing together some incident from that day. On the morning of November 13, 2012, Dave had left home after kissing Carrie goodbye as she prepared for work. Later, Carrie's mother, Nancy, received a worrying message from her daughter, saying she had broken up with her boyfriend, Dave, and was in a mental hospital due to a nervous breakdown. This alarmed Nancy, who panicked when she couldn't find Carrie in any hospital. Meanwhile, Carrie failed to appear at work on an important day when she was supposed to present a new project, raising further concerns for her safety. Later, Carrie's employer received a message stating that she had accepted a new job in Kansas and would no longer be working for him. This news surprised the management because she takes her work very seriously. Additionally, Carrie's son, Max, also received a message from she, saying she was going to her brother's wedding. However, the wedding took place without her. These conflicting messages worried her family, colleagues, and friends because they didn't seem true. No one believed she would leave her son and relocate to another state just for work. It seemed that she was either hiding something or in trouble. Concerned, her relatives decided to file a police report about her disappearance. Dave was completely confused by what was happening and can't believe it. He allowed the police full access to inspect his car and mobile phone. He actively cooperated with the investigation and tried to help in the search for his beloved, Carrie. He told police that his relationship with her had only begun a few weeks ago, but they had become very close during that time. Carrie was always calm, but after her disappearance, he began receiving aggressive messages with insults and threats on social media. The police believed him because he voluntarily cooperated with them. He was clearly very upset about her disappearance and successfully passed the polygraph test. He had no reason to harm his beloved. The detectives informed Dave of something important regarding Carrie's They revealed that Carrie had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Without medication, she might experience psychotic episodes, which could explain the unusual aggressive messages. Detectives explained that if Carrie ran out of medication while she was with him, she might lose control and have an episode. Once she was found, and her medication resumed, these issues would cease. This reassured Dave, and he promised to inform the police if she contacted him again. However, soon after, Dave regularly receives annoying messages, with threats and insults from anonymous social media accounts. These messages often targeted women connected to Dave. The number of such messages reached 60 per day, and the variety of accounts and platforms used to contact him kept increasing. Receiving threatening messages left Dave extremely scared. He reported these threats to the police. An ex-girlfriend of Dave's also told police that she had been sent similar threatening messages after the first date with him. She received threatening messages that if she continued to see Dave's, her child will be in danger. So she cut off contact with he. The situation worsened when Dave's friends began receiving messages accusing him of abusing women. These accusations spread widely, including on dating sites, causing him to receive a series of hostile messages from strangers. Dave had to defend himself, explaining that the accusations were false and lacked any evidence. Dave's life turned into a nightmare. People avoided and despised him. Meanwhile, Carrie, a woman he knew, had been missing for over 3 weeks, and the police were unable to trace her movements, phone, or bank card transactions. Everyone believes she is dead. But her relatives need to find her body and find out what happened to their daughter. Dave continues to be terrorized, so he is forced to contact the police again. However, they were actively investigating his girlfriend's disappearance, and they did not have the resources to investigate the threatening messages he received. In January 2013, Dave accidentally discovered Carrie's Ford Explorer in a parking lot near an apartment building. But it was empty. He immediately reported it to the police, who then inspected the car. The car had a scratch on one side, but there were no fingerprints on the vehicle's exterior or on the steering wheel, not even Carrie's, as if someone had intentionally erased them. However, a single fingerprint was found on a can of mints inside the car, but it didn't match any records in the national database and wasn't Carrie's. The car was very clean, except for a small pink stain on the passenger seat, resembling a spilled strawberry smoothie. After the inspection, the car was returned to Carrie's parents, who later sold it. Meanwhile, the threats against Dave become more and more terrifying. Dave kept receiving photos of the window with messages that the sender had a spare key and intended to break into the house and harm him. They also sent Dave's photos of his children with threats. Afterwards, they even threatened his neighbor. He even received a photo of a woman resembling his neighbor tied up in a car trunk. Frightened, he called his neighbor to ensure she was safe. She said that she was actually at home. During these times, Dave tried to dismiss the threats and hoped it would all end soon. This tense situation drew him closer to his neighbor, who was also targeted by the attacker. Dave and neighbor girl began to communicate with each other more regularly and share their experiences and worries. Often, while watching movies together, they would simultaneously receive threatening and insulting messages on their phones. After receiving several threatening photos, including some pictures of his children, Dave contacted the police again. However, the investigators seemed indifferent and did not take any action to resolve his problem. Frustrated, Dave submitted a report to a special unit in Omaha that handled such cases. Unfortunately, this department had only one specialist, who was overwhelmed with 94 cases and unable to assist him. Feeling desperate, Dave had no choice but to accept the situation and try to move on. He began to suspect that someone with mental health issues was behind the harassment, but he had no evidence to support this theory. Carrie's father had passed away, and her family grew increasingly worried when she missed the funeral. Instead, They received a text message with an apology from her, but no one had heard her voice for months. Carrie's family sensed that something was wrong and suspected that she was not the one sending these messages. In the spring of 2013, a man contacted Carrie's mother, Nancy. He tells Nancy that Carrie called and told him she was in a homeless shelter and wanted to be picked up. Nancy reported this to the police, and together they went to the shelter. Then they went there together, but they found out that Carrie wasn't there and she had never been there. Through the court, Nancy has been awarded custody of Carrie's son, Max, who had been living with them all along. Meanwhile, Dave and the neighbor's relationship becomes troubled. They constantly broke up and reconciled. She is increasingly annoyed and makes Dave uncomfortable. Ultimately, they ended their relationship in August 2013 because he doesn't want to build a serious relationship with she. Soon after, Dave's garage was vandalized. A few days later, Dave discovered that the house neighbor girl was renting had caught fire. The fire wasn't severe, so the rescue team was able to save the house, but the facilities need to be repaired. Tragically, a cat perished in the fire, prompting she and her 2 children to temporarily move in with relatives. She also informed the police that Carrie, who had threatened her, was the one responsible for burning down her house. Subsequently, Dave received a bizarre message, purportedly from Carrie, claiming she was pregnant. Knowing this was impossible, as he had undergone a vasectomy years earlier and was incapable of having children, this made him suspicious about whether Carrie was really the one who sent him the message. Moreover, Carrie had had a hysterectomy, making it impossible for her to be pregnant as well. 2 months later, a bright orange sign appeared at Dave's auto repair garage, accusing him of mistreating women. In January 2014, Dave's longtime girlfriend visited him at night. A few hours after they went to bed, someone threw a brick through the bathroom window. This incident caused Dave to become extremely stressed, and he realized that the situation had gotten out of control and become dangerous. Because the police did not take action, Dave decided to leave and move to a different house. He found a new job, changed his phone number and all his contact details, and bought a firearm for protection. As a result, he disappeared from public view for a long time and did not contact anyone. However, then, he registered on a dating site under a different name and arranged to meet a new girl. The girl never appeared at the date. Instead, he received a threatening message from Carrie. It turned out the girl also received a similar threat, which is why she didn't attend the date. Dave's neighbor girl also received an email expressing anger. It was from someone named Amy Flora, which was Dave's ex-wife's name. She suspects that Amy might be the one behind everything. Unable to reach Dave, so she contacted the police and reported the stalking. This theory seemed plausible because Amy has every reason to hate Dave for the divorce. During this time, Dave's gun vanished, indicating a possible break-in at his house and he could be in danger. He reported this to the police. As the situation got out of control, the police finally decided to take a closer look at the stalking. Their main focus is investigating Carrie's disappearance. When they questioned Dave again, they knew that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. With new details, the investigator doubted that Carrie was threatening her boyfriend and others. They don't understand why Carrie, who has been dating Dave for about 2 weeks, would threaten him and everyone around him. She even left her entire family, their home, and their successful job for him. It didn't add up and shows that someone may have kidnapped her and stolen her identity. On December 5, 2015, Liz Gollier, an old girlfriend of Dave's, called 911. She reported that she was attacked while walking home late at night through the park. She saw a shadow in the darkness before being attacked from behind and asked if she liked Dave, followed by a gunshot. Liz identified her attacker as resembling Amy Flora, Dave's ex-wife. The attacker shot her in the leg but then disappeared into the night. Luckily, Liz's injury was minor, and she was taken to the hospital. The police visited Amy to verify details and determine whether she was responsible for the shooting. However, Amy denied any involvement. During the investigation, the police discovered that Amy had received numerous threats from an unknown woman. Amy said that she had recently started communicating more with her ex-husband, Dave. This led to her receiving a series of threatening messages, telling her to cut off contact with him. She allowed the police to search her house, but they found nothing suspicious, and she had an alibi at the time of the attack. Detectives verified her alibi and confirmed the threatening messages, leading them to remove she from the list of suspects. Despite this, Liz insisted that Amy was the attacker. At the same time, Liz could not explain how she could see the shooter's face clearly in the dark when she was in a state of fear, and no one believed her claim. To confirm her statement, Liz brought with her a printed message confessing to the attack, which Amy emailed to her. This confession contained very detailed information about Carrie's abduction. On the morning of November 13, 2012, Carrie logged onto her social media page at approximately 6:45 a.m. The next time Carrie logged in was 3 hours later, to unfriend Dave. According to Amy's confession, this was when she abducted Carrie. Email sender accurately described Carrie's tattoos, including one not listed on the missing persons flyer. Email claimed that Carrie had suffered wounds in the abdomen or chest area, was then burned beyond recognition, and disposed of in a trash bin. It also included details about Carrie's car and house that hadn't been publicly shared, leading police to suspect that the letter's author had actually seen her body. They concluded that Carrie had been murdered over 3 years ago. But they believe that Amy did not do it, and they do not even believe that Amy herself would write a confession letter and sign it. It all looks like an unprofessional staging. The investigators were suspicious of Liz Gollier, who had provided an email from Amy, is the mastermind behind Carrie's kidnapping. A check of Liz's phone revealed that she had deleted some information. They found out that she was using an app to encrypt her location, making it hard to trace the origin of the messages. Nancy, Carrie's mother, got involved in the investigation. She believed that the messages sent to relatives by Carrie before she disappeared were written by someone else. This was because they contained grammatical mistakes and had an unusual writing style, unlike Carrie, who was always polite and articulate. Then, the police discovered that Liz had become obsessed and lost her sense of reality. She shot herself, all in an effort to terrorize Dave. It's hard to believe, but investigators keep trying to uncover the truth. Dave was shocked to learn about Liz's deception. For 3 years, she managed to conceal her actions, sending over 15,000 messages, dedicating 50 to 70 hours a week, like a full-time job. She used the timer to make sure she always had an alibi. Her actions stem from her possessive feelings towards Dave. She didn't want to share Dave with other women and was determined to win him back at any cost. Detectives began carefully questioning Liz after she was released from the hospital following a gunshot wound, with the hope that collecting information will help speed up the investigation process. Liz was interrogated, and she seemed very angry. She aggressively insisted that Amy should be jailed because posed a danger to society. Liz presented new letters purportedly showing more confessions about killing Carrie, revealing details such as Carrie being killed in her own car from the passenger seat. However, the detectives knew these claims were false and that Amy was not involved. They told Liz that Amy was now with Dave to observe her reaction. As expected, she became furious and lost control. The police continued telling Liz they needed evidence to charge Amy. They tried to link Amy to Carrie's disappearance, as Liz had accused Amy's. Liz began sharing more and more details about the crime. How did she know all this? The police located Carrie's car, which Carrie's parents had sold, and obtained permission from the new owners to inspect it. During the inspection, They removed the seat covers, revealing a large blood stain on the seat and smaller stains beneath it. DNA analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Carrie, who had disappeared 3 years earlier. They also discovered DNA traces belonging to Liz. This further increased suspicion towards her. Later, the investigation uncovered thousands of photos on Liz's computer. Most of these were selfies, but one photo showed a leg with signs of decomposition. The police identified the leg by tattoos matching those of Carrie. After a lengthy investigation, they discovered that the IP address used to send confession emails and threats supposedly from Carrie was linked to a person named Gareth. Liz's ex Gareth believed his beloved to be Shauna Gollier for many years. Little did he know that Liz was weaving conspiracies and a web of lies around the story of Carrie's disappearance. During the inspection of Gareth's house, the police found nothing of interest. However, a search of Liz's previous home uncovered new evidence. Officers discovered several mobile phones and electronic devices, including a camera owned by Carrie. It was confirmed that one of the phones was used to call Carrie's mother. This phone had a voice-changing app installed. Detectives also matched fingerprints found on a candy pack in Carrie's car to Liz's fingerprints, and they match. Liz's actions were incredibly cruel. She cruelly sent messages to Carrie's mother and son, giving them hope that Carrie was still alive. This deception went so far that Max, Carrie's son, wrote a message 3 years after his mother's disappearance to the number from which he last received a message from her. He wrote that if she was really his mother, she should come back because he wanted her to be with him at his graduation. Based on this evidence, Liz was arrested in December 2016. She was charged with first-degree murder, concealment of a body. Her defense team opted for a judge to decide her guilt, rather than a jury. The prosecution argued that she stabbed Carrie to death in November 2012 in Carrie's own car. They claimed Liz lay in wait for Carrie as she left Dave's house and attacked her when she reached her car. The prosecution presented all the evidence pointing to Liz's guilt. Another disturbing story about Liz's emerged during the trial. Liz once had a young son named Cody. Cody's father, who had a mental disability, cherished his son. When Cody was found unconscious, it was determined little boy died from shaken baby syndrome. Cody's father confessed to the crime and was imprisoned. However, his family believed Liz was the true perpetrator and had manipulated the father into confessing. Additionally, it was revealed that this was not Liz's only instance of harassment. After breaking up with another man, she stalked his new girlfriend, continued even after they married and had a child. On August 15, 2017, Liz Gollier was found guilty on all charges. She, however, did not admit guilt for any of them and showed no remorse. Her lawyer sought leniency, requesting a sentence of no more than 30 years with parole eligibility after 15. However, the prosecution argued that Liz lacked humanity and did not merit a reduced sentence. Consequently, she received life imprisonment without parole. Liz continues to deny her guilt and is appealing the verdict. Carrie's family never recovered her body, which remains missing. They long to find her remains to fulfill her wishes of cremation and scattering her ashes. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Joseph and Olga Connell. The Connell family lived in Wilmington, Delaware, USA, and had 3 children. However, then their parents divorced, which was a difficult experience for everyone. The children stayed with their mother. The eldest child was John, the middle child was Joseph, and the youngest was a girl named Kelly. During their childhood, they often quarreled over small things, but as they grew older, they became very close and found common ground. Their mother also began a relationship with another man who became like a second father to them. The family enjoyed a comfortable life in a quiet, affluent neighborhood. Joseph, the middle son, known as Joe, grew up to be an ambitious and enterprising young man. Although he is often overly meticulous and focused on business, he is also known for his cheerful personality. He has done well in his career. He co-owned a car service and a store with his best friend, Christopher. Their partnership thrived as they were both passionate about their business and focused on its growth. During this time, Joseph met Olga online, a young woman from Russia. Both were over 30 and had experienced heartache in previous relationships, so they were seeking love. They quickly connected due to their friendly and vibrant personalities, which made them likable to others. Joseph, who thought of himself as a lifelong bachelor, was surprised to meet such a beautiful blonde who changed his life and beliefs completely. They spent many hours texting and calling each other, and grew so close that Olga traveled from Siberia to the USA to meet him. Joseph was thrilled when they met in person. He was captivated by her beauty, and she appreciated his kind and gentle nature. Their mutual attraction led them to start dating, and their relationship developed quickly. Joseph's family quickly grew fond of Olga, as their son was completely smitten by her. She appeared gentle and shy, but beneath that exterior was a lively and ambitious woman capable of doing anything. The entire family adored her, believing she was the one who could finally help their son settle down. Joseph had promised to marry her, and soon after, they decided to plan their wedding. Problems in the relationship began at that moment. The first issue was the wedding ring. According to family tradition, the mother wanted to pass down her jewelry to her son, Joseph. However, the wedding ring had already been given to her daughter Kelly, who had married 10 years earlier. This ring was valuable, worth about $20,000 due to its diamond inlay. Joseph discreetly replaced the diamonds with cubic zirconia and gave the modified ring back to Kelly. He then took the diamonds and set them into a new engagement ring for Olga. He assumed that Olga and Kelly wouldn't notice the difference. No one intended to deceive Kelly. They meant to return everything eventually, but the process took longer than expected. Kelly eventually noticed the difference in the stones, which upset her. She confronted Joseph about it, and he became very upset as well. He felt that she was trying to break family traditions, which angered him. The wedding ceremony was held in the U.S. Virgin Islands. However, the groom's younger sister, Kelly, did not attend because she was upset with the couple and had to work that day. However, she sent Olga a few sarcastic messages about her wedding ring. At that time, Olga did not know what Joseph had done with that wedding ring. The wedding ring caused a lack of respect, greatly affecting their mood. Just a few weeks after the wedding, the young couple experienced constant arguments, especially after someone broke into their home while they were at work. The intruder stole a large amount of jewelry and family heirlooms. Fortunately, at that moment, the Connell family's diamond ring was on Olga's finger, so it was not taken. After Joseph discovered that someone had broken into his house, he contacted the police. Officers arrived to investigate the scene and search for the intruder. To the forensic scientist's surprise, there was no evidence to confirm that a robbery had actually taken place, raising suspicions that it might have been staged. Unfortunately, they would not be able to resolve this case, as a far more serious crime soon unfolded, involving Joseph and Olga. Joseph and Olga began their life together on the Virgin Islands in the Caribbean Sea, where they enjoyed their honeymoon a month after their wedding. They relished each other's company, the ocean, and the sun, engaging in activities like fishing, sailing on a yacht through the turquoise waters, and savoring delicious cuisine. With plenty of financial resources, they fulfilled every wish on their honeymoon. Upon returning home, they purchased a brand new Mercedes convertible, worth over $100,000. Joseph can afford this luxury car because he is a co-owner of a fast-growing car company that brings in about $1 million in revenue each year. Olga, a former stock trader, was well-versed in finance and client relations. After marrying, she quickly joined Joseph's business as an administrator. With her attractive appearance, Russian accent, and friendly demeanor, she played a key role in growing the business. Everything seemed perfect until tragedy struck. On September 23, just 3 months after their wedding, gunshots rang out around 2 a.m. at Joseph and Olga's home in Wilmington. An eyewitness called emergency services to report a woman who had been shot near a condominium in the Dean CL residential complex. At that time, Olga was still alive. Medics arrived within minutes and provided first aid to her. She had sustained gunshot wounds and was bleeding. They rushed her to the hospital, but despite their efforts, Olga tragically died en route. While investigating the crime scene, police discovered another body nearby, Joseph, who had been shot in the back of the head and was already dead. The incident suggested that this was not a random robbery. It appeared that both Joseph and Olga had been deliberately attacked from behind. Detectives quickly pieced together the information that had been gathered by the police officers. They suspect that the previous robbery at Joseph and Olga's home may have had something to do with their tragic end. Although there were several witnesses and neighbors who heard gunfire, no one actually saw the shooting, which left investigators without clues new. Some witnesses mentioned hearing 2 men arguing loudly just before the shots were fired. The incident occurred right after Joseph and Olga returned from celebrating Olga's 39th birthday at a bar. They had spent the evening with friends and family, enjoying themselves until they felt tired. After midnight, they drove home in their convertible and parked near the condominium entrance, unaware that danger was waiting for them. Olga suffered multiple gunshot wounds to her face, with one bullet entering her cheek and exiting through the back of her head. Joseph was shot multiple times, including in the head, and was found lifeless in the bushes nearby. Meanwhile, Olga was fighting for her life and waiting for assistance. The police arrived while helping Olga, hoping she could provide a name or some clue about the attacker. However, she did not respond. Nearby, they discovered many spent cartridges, suggesting that there might have been multiple assailants. The cartridges came in different calibers, indicating various types of weapons were used. It was unlikely that a single criminal would use different pistols. In total, around 20 bullets had been fired, further implying that several attackers were involved and that they acted with confidence. The police quickly confirmed that the attack was not a robbery, as nothing was stolen. Joseph and Olga had a wallet with a large amount of cash, and Olga's bag containing a phone and other valuables was left nearby. She was also wearing an expensive wedding ring worth tens of thousands of dollars. After investigating the incident, the police determined that it was an ambush targeting there. They were deliberately attacked near their home and shot multiple times. They appeared to be a happy couple with no known conflicts. However, the motive for the attack remained unclear. Once the investigation started, detectives interviewed the relatives of Joseph and Olga. Joseph's mother and stepfather claimed that they had no enemies and that no one wanted to harm them. However, it was known that Joseph had a disagreement with his younger sister, Kelly, regarding the wedding ring, which came up during the questioning. Some suspected that Kelly might have killed Day out of jealousy over the ring. Did she really hate her brother, Joseph, so much that she had to kill both him and her sister Olga-in-law in revenge? However, it was odd that Kelly was one of the first people to arrive at the crime scene, especially since she lived in another part of the area. She was visibly affected by the tragedy. She actively cooperated with investigators and looked forward to providing assistance. She opened up about her recent problems with Joseph, which she had been dealing with for about a month. She honestly told them the whole story and even showed them the angry text correspondence they had exchanged with each other and with Olga. The messages indicated that Olga suspected Kelly of the robbery, but she denied any involvement and claimed she was innocent in the attack on Joseph and Olga. Meanwhile, it was confirmed that the attacker was a man and had an accomplice. Detectives also discovered that Kelly had been fighting breast cancer for a long time, had recently undergone difficult treatment, and was in recovery. Given her condition, it seemed unlikely she had the physical strength to commit the crime. Despite this, the Armed Forces Police still considered Kelly a suspect, believing she might be involved due to a potential motive of greed. Throughout the interrogations, Kelly did not crack under pressure, yet she remained a suspect for a considerable time because of the apparent motive. At this point, detectives are also considering another theory, that the crime could have been motivated by jealousy. They considered whether one of Olga's or Joseph's ex-partners might have harbored resentment and sought revenge. Investigators looked into the former partners of both spouses, but none of them aroused suspicion. Olga had no relationships in the USA besides Joseph, making the possibility of an ex-boyfriend of hers from Russia coming to the United States to seek revenge unlikely. Contrary, Joseph maintained good relationships with his ex-girlfriends, and none wished him harm. They were both married and had no intentions of rekindling past relationships, leading detectives to dismiss this jealousy theory. Researchers have had difficulty finding a motive for the tragedy. Detectives began to consider other motives and searched for any enemies of Joseph and Olga. However, they were kind and friendly, and they had no involvement in any conflicts. Subsequently, they turned their attention to Kelly's husband, Gareth. They suspected he might have been persuaded by Kelly to commit a double murder. However, Gareth had a solid alibi. He also corroborated Kelly's statement that on the day of the murder, she had been feeling unwell and was recovering from an illness. The theory that Joseph and Olga's deaths were related to criminal activity has been skepticized due to Joseph's reputation. Joseph made his money honestly, and he and Olga will not engage in illegal activities. However, witnesses later confirmed that Joseph was secretly selling steroids. The sale of this drug was banned, and he made huge profits from this. Joseph's business associate, Christopher River, was implicated in the crime. A close associate of Christopher revealed that he had often spoken negatively about Joseph, he even accusing Joseph of embezzlement. This stems from the fact that Joseph sold steroids through Joseph's joint store with him, and Joseph kept all the profits for himself. Detectives then visited Christopher, who had been Joseph's partner for over 10 years. They had built their business together from the ground up. They also very close and have been through many difficulties together. However, instead of feeling grief over the loss of his close friend and associate, he appeared surprisingly calm, as if the tragedy had no effect on him. He claimed that he had arranged to meet Joseph and Olga at a bar that night, but then he was unable to come due to work. Christopher also mentioned various rumors about Olga, including rumors of her ties to the Russian mafia. He also suggested that Joseph was not entirely honest and urged the police to explore various leads in their search for the killers. Although there were suspicions about Christopher's honesty, a thorough investigation was necessary. This led to the discovery of Joseph's connections to the criminal world, which were corroborated by several acquaintances. A couple of years before his marriage, Joseph had been imprisoned for illegal possession of weapons. The incident occurred in a bar where a fight broke out, and Joseph retrieved a shotgun from his pickup truck to threaten those involved. After his conviction, Joseph formed new relationships in prison and learned about the steroid trade from some fellow inmates. After his release, he began engaging in illegal medical drug trafficking, establishing himself as a well-known figure in this illicit business, alongside his primary occupation. It remained unclear whether these activities could have motivated the murder. Did Joseph have conflicts with anyone in this illicit trade? Is it possible that Russian mafia operating in the US were involved? Detectives need to quickly find the truth. They looked into some suspicious individuals and investigated a man named Harry Cook, who was interested in partnering with Joseph in an auto shop. By the time of Joseph and Olga's deaths, Harry had invested over $100,000 into the business. This could also be the motive for the attack. Additionally, Harry lived near Wilmington, but he had a solid alibi for the time of the incident. Consequently, the police hit a dead end and continued to investigate Christopher, suspecting that he might have been stealing money from Joseph. The investigation into the store's financial records revealed that, despite a high income, Christopher was experiencing big losses. His expenses were skyrocketing, which raised suspicions of theft. It became clear that someone was stealing money, and it was eventually discovered that Christopher was the culprit. As law enforcement looked into the missing funds, they learned that Christopher was struggling with opioid addiction. He was using his earnings to fund his drug habit, and his income was no longer sufficient to cover his expenses. Consequently, he resorted to stealing from the store, which was effectively stealing from Joseph, to support his addiction. Christopher's addiction had spiraled out of control. He was consuming large quantities of illegal drugs and was desperate for money. He had already incurred significant debts and was stealing from anyone he could. Additionally, he began exhibiting paranoid behavior. He claiming that the armed forces were after him and trying to kill him. His attempts to cover up his crimes only drew more attention from the police. At this point, the police were becoming suspicious of his alibi. Christopher willingly shared CCTV footage with detectives, shows he was at his home at the time of the incident. The police verified that the timestamps on the recordings were accurate, but they still doubted his story and sensed something was off. They then examined Christopher's mobile phone. On the night of the murder, he made significantly more calls than usual, with many occurring around the same time as the attack on Joseph and Olga. Although the call log had been deleted from his phone, law enforcement was able to recover it easily. On the night of the incident, Christopher called some friends named Dominique and Aaron, people who may have been involved in the case. It seems that he was under the influence of illegal substances and wanted to kill Joseph and Olga. Rather than committing the act himself, he hired Dominique and Aaron to carry it out. The case is getting more and more complicated. If the murder had gone as planned, business associate of Joseph, Christopher, would have received $1 million from Joseph's life insurance. When they first started their business, they had a similar insurance policy. If Joseph died, Christopher can receive a large sum of money, enough to solve all his problems and pay off all his debts. However, he could not access this money because Joseph had married. Following the murder, Joseph's wife, Olga, would receive the full insurance payout, leaving Christopher with nothing. Therefore, he felt he needed to eliminate both Joseph and Olga to be able to get all of this money. This theory is reinforced by conversations between Christopher and two accomplices, Dominique and Aaron, on the night of the murder. Christopher frequently asks them when they will return home, which shows that he is very worried about the success of the attack plan. The responses he received were unclear. Detectives quickly seized 4 mobile phones belonging to all suspects involved in the double murder, Christopher, Dominique, and Aaron. They analyzed the phones using cell tower data, confirming that on September 23, 2013, Dominique and Aaron were near the Joseph's house. The main culprits, Dominique and Aaron, were seen on surveillance cameras which Christopher presented to validate his alibi. However, video from surveillance cameras has evidence that does not support Christopher. It revealed the unusual behavior of he appeared restless as he paced around the apartment, worrying without letting go of the phone. At that moment, he was clearly awaiting a response from Dominique and Aaron. Notably, then Dominique was of great assistance to the investigation, he confessing during police questioning and agreeing to a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence. He stated that Christopher had asked him to kill Joseph and Olga. Christopher had initially provided a $5,000 deposit, then promised an additional $60,000 once Joseph and Olga were dead. As part of a plea deal with the prosecution, Dominique testified against Christopher in court. A year after the brutal massacre, Christopher was charged with conspiracy to commit double murder, Joseph and Olga. Aaron also appeared in court. The hearing started 19 months after the investigation began. Although Christopher had a detailed plan, it ultimately failed. He hoped that the investigation would become confusing and not go in the right direction. He suggested several explanations, including Joseph's involvement in illegal steroid sales, robberies that happened just before the tragedy, and a feud with Kelly. Christopher thought these ideas might distract the police, allowing them to arrest someone else. Fortunately, law enforcement did not fall for his tactics and uncovered the real killers. The police proved that the robbery at Joseph's house before the murder was staged on Christopher's orders. They entered the house to find and steal an engagement ring. If successful, investigators would likely have considered Joseph's younger sister, Kelly, the main suspect in the murder. However, the ring was not stolen, resulting in Christopher's plan failing. During the trials of the criminals, Baron Thompson has confessed to the murders of Joseph and Olga and received a sentence of 45 years. Evidence showed that he was the one who fired the gun. Christopher Rivers, who instigated the crime, was sentenced to 2 life terms plus an additional 50 years. His accomplice, Dominique Benson, was convicted of conspiracy in abetting, receiving a 5-year prison sentence. In this case, Joseph's younger sister, Kelly, has been hurt a lot. Initially, the police pressured her, attempting to falsely accuse her of murdering her own brother, Joseph, putting her at risk of imprisonment despite her innocence. Although she felt upset about her mother and brother's actions regarding the wedding ring, but those issues are just minor controversies. During the funeral, Kelly expressed her deep love for her brother and grieved the significant loss. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Turner Fisher. After the tragic death of his wife, Ernest Fisher was left to care for 4 children, all of whom were now adults. However, some members of the family were traumatized by the loss of their mother. Initially, this was considered a normal response to grief, as everyone processes loss differently. Some people may be overwhelmed by grief, leading to disturbing behaviors. Ernest was a retired man living a quiet life in the southern suburbs of Parallel, near Burt, Australia. The family lived modestly, with Ernest raising his 4 children on his own. His eldest son, Joshua, was 26 in 2016 and dedicated his free time to studying for a programming diploma. The second son, Matthew, was 23 and worked as a freight carrier. His third daughter, Hannah, 20, is studying design and spends all her free time studying. The youngest daughter, Sylvia, 16, is still in high school. Ernest's wife passed away 2 years prior to the events described, in 2014, due to cancer. Her death was a significant tragedy for the entire family. On her deathbed, she asked her son Matthew to take care of his siblings and to support their father as he aged. Matthew agreed to this promise. Like the rest of the family, he felt a deep sadness over their loss. However, shortly after their mother's death, the household began to deteriorate rapidly. Ernest lost his job, which led to a lack of finances. Within months, the situation became chaotic, with furniture and books scattered throughout every room. It is important to note that the youngest daughter was not involved in the events described. In contrast, Matthew was a sociable and attractive young man who was popular with girls. His turbulent personal life set him apart from his siblings. Unlike his siblings, who spent most of their time studying, Matthew was active and independent. He regularly went to the gym and participated in many outdoor sports such as soccer, basketball, and volleyball. He was also the only one in the family with a job, which allowed him to maintain his interests. In contrast, his siblings were quite shy. Hannah and Joshua preferred to spend their time alone studying and rarely interacted with each other, leading to a strained relationship between the children. On Monday, October 3, 2016, 23-year-old Matthew Fisher failed to report to work, which was unusual for him. He had always been a responsible employee, the sole provider for his family, and he never missed a shift. Concerned, his colleagues and friends tried to contact him, but their efforts were in vain. They then reached out to his family for information about his whereabouts. Matthew's father seemed unconcerned and jokingly shared a story about how Matthew had run away to travel in Eastern Australia with a wealthy girl he had admired from a magazine cover. This story is told by Joshua and Hannah as told by their father. Matthew's friends were suspicious of the situation. Matthew had never thought about it before. Matthew's car was at home, why didn't he drive away? His friends suspected Matthew's father and other family members of lying, but Ernest only responded with cheerful jokes. Later, Matthew's friends even tried to enter his house to gather any information about Matthew, but they were unsuccessful. They suspected something was wrong and believed that Matthew would not simply run away from home. They knew about his difficult relationship with his family, who often criticized him and felt jealous. At that time, Matthew also did not have a girlfriend, so his friends continued to search for clues about what really happened to him. They discovered that Matthew had gone missing on October 1st. He had failed to show up for an appointment with a friend and had not contacted anyone since. Meanwhile, Matthew's phone remained silent, causing his friends to worry, but his family seemed unconcerned. They stopped looking for him and ceased all contact. 17 days after his disappearance, Matthew's friends went to the police to report him missing and share their concerns about how his family was acting. The police took their statements and attempted to call Matthew, but his phone was turned off, making it impossible to locate him. The police quickly contacted Matthew's father, Ernest. He repeated the story he had shared with Matthew's friends, that Matthew had run off with a new girlfriend. However, the police found Ernest's lack of concern for his son suspicious. They believed Matthew's car was still at the house, making it impossible for him to leave without it. Additionally, they were unable to find the new girlfriend. After reviewing Matthew's messages, the police found no evidence to support the father's story. On October 22nd, they called Ernest into the police station for questioning. He initially stands by his statement, but when the police confront him about Matthew's death, claiming that they have substantial evidence, Ernest's story begins to become confusing. The police indicated that they had good reason to believe that Matthew was dead and had not left the house. At the 90th minute of interrogation, Ernest took a short break and then suddenly confessed that he killed his son because he had been swearing at him and insulting him. Ernest claimed he felt there was no other solution and could only think of murder. Ernest said that Matthew frequently threatened to use violence against Ernest and Matthew's siblings. Ernest also mentioned that Matthew often accused him of not getting his mother to the hospital in time for cancer treatment, which might have saved her, and blamed him for her death. This blame frustrated Ernest. After speaking with Ernest's other children, Joshua and Hannah, the police discovered that they were also present at the crime scene and assisted their father in covering up the incident. On October 1, 2016, a tragic event occurred. On that day, Ernest had planned to drive to a friend's house to watch the final of a football match. At the same time, his son Matthew needed a car to run some errands. Although Matthew had his own car, the situation caused a conflict between them, leading to a horrific incident that occurred between 11 o'clock and 11:30 in the morning. Unable to bear the argument with his son, Ernest went to the stables in the backyard and took 2 knives. When he returned home, he found Matthew in Joshua's room and attacked him, inflicting multiple stab wounds. One knife pierced Matthew's heart and lung. After the attack, Ernest left the room, leaving his son bleeding on the floor. Meanwhile, his other children, Joshua and Hannah, were eating lunch in the living room. They ran to the sound and found Matthew lying on the floor, covered in blood and unresponsive. Hannah suggested they call the police, but her father strongly opposed the idea. Ernest managed to convince her not to go through with it. Instead, He went into the backyard to dig a grave while Hannah and Joshua remained frozen in place. Ernest, standing beside his dead son, is more worried about missing a soccer game with his friends than losing his son. After digging the grave, Ernest returned to the house and spoke to his children. He asked them to help clean up the crime scene and bury Matthew in the backyard while he was away. He then calmly got ready and left to enjoy a soccer game with his friends, seemingly without remorse for having just harmed a family member. Remarkably, Hannah and Joshua complied with their father's request. They meticulously cleaned up the blood in the room with cleaning supplies. The room was covered in blood, with bloodstains on the walls and furniture, indicative of the brutal attack on his son. Fearing a similar fate, Joshua and Hannah followed their father's orders without question. They first used bleach to wipe down the walls, then the furniture, carpets, and floors. They cleaned the room thoroughly and burned anything that could not be wiped clean to remove potential evidence. As Joshua and Hannah entered the backyard, they decided to dig deeper than the grave their father had hastily dug. This was important to ensure the body was more securely hidden. Since Matthew was quite large, they had difficulty moving him. They dragged him on a stepladder and across the lawn to the grave, where they dumped him and buried him unceremoniously. They then returned home, showered, changed their clothes, and cleaned up the area. Ernest returned home about 5 hours later. He checked to make sure the children had cleaned up the blood in the room and disposed of the body, and he praised them for their efforts. The youngest daughter, Sylvia, 16, was visiting relatives on the day of the murder and did not witness the horrific incident. When asked how hard he stabbed his son, Ernest replied, "Very hard. Because he wanted to stab his son to death. If Matthew had attacked back, Ernest will die. Because Matthew was stronger than him." When the police asked Ernest how many injuries he had caused to his son, he replied, "You should dig him up and find out." When told he was going to be arrested for murder, Ernest laughed and joked, showing no concern about the situation. The police asked him why he had not considered other options for dealing with his son. Ernest claimed that he had no other choice. The police suggested he could have contacted the police to help remove his son from their home or sought a safe place for his family. Ernest laughed again, saying he didn't want to spend money and was against moving. He viewed killing his son as the only way to free his family. After this admission, he led the police to the location of the body. Upon searching the family's yard, they discovered the Matthew buried there, as the father had indicated. A month had passed since Matthew's disappearance, and only 10 days had gone by since his friends reported it to the police. The most shocking part was that the father, while giving his testimony, laughed and joked about his murdered son, showing no remorse for his actions. He firmly believed he was justified. Ernest, 65, Joshua, 26, and Hannah, 20, were all arrested and charged with murder and concealing the body. Matthew was later buried next to his mother. Funds were raised to cover the funeral costs, supplemented by Matthew's savings. He bought a large headstone for his mother, while the rest of his family seemed unconcerned, not even having a headstone. Police were skeptical of the motive given. Ernest considered Matthew a danger to the entire family, leading him to decide to eliminate him. Friends and acquaintances of the Matthew consistently described him as a good person who had never exhibited aggression or violence. It was puzzling that if Matthew truly posed a threat to the family, they had never filed a complaint with the police prior to this tragedy. The police interviewed all members of the Ernest family to uncover the true motives and piece together the sequence of events. The police spoke to Ernest again, who claimed that Matthew was a cruel and dangerous man who regularly used drugs. He said that he had to kill Matthew to end the atmosphere of fear that Matthew had created in their family. Joshua was very emotional during the interview. He cried as he described the image of the crime scene and younger brother's bloody body in his mind. In the room, he saw his father holding 2 knives and standing over Matthew's body. He did not see the struggle or the moment of the murder. Hannah remained composed during her interrogation but repeatedly recounted the same story. She expressed concerns that her brother Matthew was very different from the rest of the family and could be a threat. He had often yelled at her and had used physical force once during their teenage years when they got into a fight. However, Hannah could not point to any other incidents that proved Matthew was dangerous. She admitted that she felt remorse and guilt over the situation. Hannah wished she could go back in time and call the police immediately after the incident. At that moment, Joshua and Hannah were afraid of their angry father and did not speak up against him. However, they could not understand why they continued to live with Ernest and their Matthew's body in the yard as if nothing had happened. If they felt guilty, why didn't they go to the police later on? The hearing for the case began in mid-2018, and it took 2 years for the investigation to gather and analyze all the materials. During the trial, the Ernest and their defense argued that the murder was an act of self-defense, claiming that Matthew posed a serious threat to the entire family. The lawyers for the Ernest spoke negatively about the Matthew, portraying him as a violent and aggressive person who had attacked them. However, no one provided convincing evidence of Matthew's aggression or any real threat he had posed. No one noticed any bruises on Hannah or Joshua, and it is unclear what caused the family conflict or whether Ernest was the one who started it. It is also worrying that Ernest chose to kill his loved one rather than seek police help to resolve the issue or simply remove him from the house if he truly posed a threat. In court, Ernest Fisher appeared unusually calm, which raised suspicions. He did not seem to show any remorse for what had happened and did not feel any sadness for his son. Ernest was often rude in court, insulting everyone involved, and was frequently reprimanded for his behavior. Family acquaintances described Ernest as a ruthless person, and several testified that they had never seen Matthew show any hostility toward his relatives. His friends disputed Ernest's testimony, insisting that Matthew was not aggressive and did not use drugs. Matthew regularly underwent random drug and alcohol testing at work and had never had any problems. Friends noted that after their mother's death, Matthew's relationship with their father and siblings became very strained. Joshua and Hannah were often depressed. They rarely left the house, rarely changed clothes, did not work, and kept the house in disarray. They hardly communicated with each other and were heavily dependent on Matthew for support. Matthew had to take on the role of primary provider for the family. Initially, he understood the situation, but this temporary role lasted too long. Joshua and Hannah were content with their current situation and did not want to look for work. Matthew felt frustrated with his family because he was tired of being responsible for the other adult members of the family, which felt like a burden. Despite his efforts to comfort them, they were in vain. They preferred to live a closed life, relying on him, and creating more tension in their relationships. Matthew's friends dismissed the idea that he was aggressive or hurtful to his father. Although he could have stayed away from his family's problems for a long time, he chose to stay and support them. He promised his mother before she died that he would take care of them. Matthew, like anyone else, can sometimes lose his temper during arguments. However, he doesn't seem to be a cruel or violent person. He even has a tattoo on his arm that says, "Family is everything." Despite the many testimonies presented by the prosecution, Ernest's lawyer maintained that the father had acted in self-defense. Meanwhile, Matthew's siblings believed their father killed him to protect them, and they supported him during the trial. They were not charged as accomplices to the murder. Instead, they faced charges related to the disposal of the body and evidence. Further information suggested that Ernest had been planning to eliminate his son for a long time. It was discovered that he had purchased 2 knives well in advance, which he had saved specifically for the act of stabbing Matthew, indicating a premeditated intent. At the end of a 3-week trial, the jury reached a verdict. After deliberating for 2 hours, Ernest Fisher was found guilty of premeditated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Ernest showed no emotion when the sentence was announced. The judge also highlighted that the defendant did not show any remorse for his actions and criticized Ernest for forcing his children into a horrific choice. He should not have placed the children in such a difficult situation. Joshua and Hannah, out of deep loyalty and fear of their father, made a poor decision. The judge noted that one of the worst experiences for anyone is to be harmed by their own loving family. Joshua Fisher received a 4-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 2 years, while Hannah was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months, eligible for parole after 22 months. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren McCluskey. Since she was a child, Lauren McCluskey has been a very talented person. She dances, sings, and is an excellent track and field athlete. She has won many medals and awards. Eventually, she received an offer from the University of Utah and left her hometown of Pullman, Washington, to start a new life in Salt Lake City. At the university, she participates in athletics competitions, including the 100-meter dash, hurdles, high jump, shot put, long jump, javelin throw, and 800-meter run. Her talent made her one of the standout athletes on the university team. Besides, she also studies well in the communication department and makes friends with many people. However, in September 2018, her life took a tragic turn. On a Friday evening, Lauren and her friends decided to go dancing and have drinks at a small club near the University of Utah. During the evening, a man caught her attention. As the night wound down, he introduced himself as Sean Phillips, saying he worked as a security guard at the club and was also a student at Salt Lake Community College. He was 28 years old. Despite their age difference, but they quickly found common ground. His charm and interest in her drew her in, and they exchanged phone numbers, planning to meet again the following day to spend more time together. Lauren felt very happy to meet Sean. She even called her mother, Jill McCluskey, to tell her about him. Sean gives her flowers at dinner, tries to be charming and gently proposes. He was tall, muscular, handsome, and very sociable guy. He quickly found common ground with Lauren, an energetic and friendly girl. He often stayed overnight in her dorm room, and she even let him borrow her car. However, some concerning behaviors began to surface. Initially, Sean encouraged Lauren to invite her friends to their gatherings, but then, he started telling her how to dress, usually in a t-shirt and jeans. When she was with her friends, he would constantly call, asking where she was, who she was with, and when she would return. If she didn't respond immediately, he would become upset. Lauren explained to friends that Sean's behavior stemmed from insecurities caused by past relationships and believed that over time, this would improve. Sean begins to explain to Lauren the importance of being careful around others and always being prepared for unfortunate situations that may arise. He bought her a can of pepper spray and insisted she carry it everywhere. He also took her to a shooting range and asked her to purchase a gun for him. Around this time, Lauren cut off all communication with her friends and spent all her time outside of school with Sean, focusing solely on training with him. Concerned, her friends reached out to the dorm staff where she lived. The staff, already uneasy about Sean's frequent presence in the dorms, grew even more alarmed when they discovered that he was tracking Lauren's movements on campus, monitoring her comings and goings. It became evident that he was not just overly jealous but was attempting to control and manipulate Lauren's life. Something was clearly wrong. As it turned out, Sean was not who he had introduced himself to be. One day, Lauren accidentally saw a photo of his ID card and learned the truth. Sean Phillips was not a 28-year-old college student or the kind, trustworthy person he pretended to be. His real name was Melvin Sean Rowland, and in fact he is 38 years old, born in 1981. He was skilled at fabricating stories and concealing his true identity. Investigators later uncovered several women who had been deceived by his lies in different ways. Unknowingly, Lauren had become one of his victims. After seeing his ID card, she begins to realize the truth about him. Melvin's true identity came to light on October 5th when Lauren returned to her home in Pullman, Washington. She confided in a friend, sharing everything that had happened. The friend suggested searching online for information about Melvin Sean Rowland. The search revealed alarming details. Melvin was a sex offender. In 2004, he was convicted of luring a minor and attempting to forcibly harass her. He spent 9 years in state prison and was released on parole in September 2013. Realizing the truth, Lauren knew she had to end the relationship with him. Lauren returns to college in Utah and makes plans to break up with Melvin. On October 9th, she called and asked him to come over. When he arrived, the planned breakup didn't happen, and he stayed the night in Lauren's room. She later told her friends that Melvin had apologized for lying about himself and explained an incident involving a false age claim by a girl at a fraternity party. He insisted that the other allegations against him were untrue. Lauren's friends were doubtful of his story and urged her to end the relationship, which she did the following day. Afterward, Lauren called her mother to explain what had happened. She mentioned that she planned to meet Melvin that evening to get her car back. Her mother, Jill, grew very concerned about the situation. Worrying about her daughter's safety, Jill contacted campus police to inform them and asked them to keep an eye on Lauren while she got her car back. Jill felt uneasy and deeply anxious. Jill, dreading the idea of Melvin, who seemed to bring trouble into Lauren's life, being anywhere near she. Lauren was able to pick up her car without any issues, and both she and Melvin carried on with their lives. After that, she had a short period of peace. She focused on her studies and began to rebuild her routine. However, this peace is soon broken by messages sent from unknown phone numbers, all referencing Melvin. Concerned, she contacted the police, leaving a message with the operator, but no one got back to her that day. Then a message arrived from Melvin's number, saying he was fine, but hinting that something strange was happening. Soon after, messages from anonymous numbers continued to arrive, affirmed that they were in possession of sensitive photos of Lauren and Melvin. The sender demanded $10,000, threatening to release the photos online if they do not receive the money. On the morning of October 13th, Melvin emailed Lauren, revealing that he was also being blackmailed. He advised her to pay the money, so she sent $10,000 to the unknown blackmailer. However, she began to suspect that Melvin himself might be behind the blackmail rather than an unknown party. Feeling insecure, she contacted the University of Utah police. The dispatcher forwarded her complaint to Miguel Dasso, a University of Utah police officer. Wanting to address the situation directly, Lauren and her friend walked across campus to speak with the officer in person. When they arrived, they met with the police and told the whole story, including giving Melvin's name and that he was a sex offender. Police believe this was a hoax and that Lauren may have made up the story about the death threat. Lauren and her friend believed that they had taken the necessary steps and that the problem would soon be resolved. Unfortunately, almost no action was taken. Officer Miguel received copies of the messages and images involved, even adding one of the photos to his personal collection. He later bragged to another officer that he could now view it whenever he wanted. Lauren received no follow-up from the university police despite her repeated calls to the station, during which she explained to the dispatcher that she was being blackmailed again. In October, near Lauren's dorm, Melvin was spotted loitering in the parking lot, wearing a suit. About 45 minutes later, she returned to her dorm after track practice. At the time, no one knew who Melvin was. She entered the dorm and went upstairs. Shortly afterward, Melvin, now dressed as Deadpool, approached the dorm door. He later claimed he knew Lauren had called the police, leading her to suspect that someone at the police department had informed him about the situation. Lauren had forgotten that a few weeks ago, she had used Melvin's phone to log in and check her email. This gave him access to her communications with the police, friends, and family without her realizing it. She contacted the Salt Lake City Police, hoping they could connect her with another department for assistance. However, under the jurisdictional rules, police said they were not of much help, as their jurisdiction was limited to campus. This also prevents Officer Miguel from taking action outside of campus. Additionally, some have suggested that Lauren's assumption that someone in the police department had leaked information to Melvin may make her paranoid. Phone records revealed that she called both police departments multiple times over several days, desperately seeking a solution. On October 22, the situation took a dire turn. CCTV footage showed Melvin leaving his apartment at 6 a.m. He rented a car from his neighbor and drove to the parking lot in front of Lauren's dorm, arriving at 9 a.m. He walked toward the building just as she was leaving her dorm. Around that time, she received a text message, supposedly from Deputy Chief McLennan of the University Police, asking her to come to the station to review evidence. Sensing something was off, she ignored the message and instead went to meet with a counselor, who had been helping her deal with the breakup and its aftermath. At that time, Melvin was in the same building as Lauren. He was carrying a small suitcase. He was looking for she but couldn't find her, so he went to her dorm instead. There, he managed to gain access. Once inside, he spoke with a group of 4 students. Over time, 3 of them left, leaving 1 student behind. The remaining student later told police that Melvin asked if he wanted to see what was inside the suitcase. Inside was a .40 caliber Beretta pistol and a full magazine. He even let the student handle the gun before leaving. Meanwhile, Lauren had finished her evening class and was preparing to return to her dorm. It had been a difficult week, so she decided to call her parents and take a short walk across campus while talking to them. At the same time, Melvin left the dorm, intending to intercept her on her usual route back. As Lauren walked, she told her parents about her day, and they listened closely. Suddenly, they heard her scream as Melvin began chasing her. Her father, Matthew, immediately called 911. Melvin grabbed Lauren, forced her into the car with a gun and pushed her into the back seat. Then, he shooting her 7 times at close range. After opening fire, he drove through the parking lot, crossed the bridge and continued straight to the nearest subway station in Salt Lake. There, he waited calmly at a bus stop and made a phone call, having already arranged for someone to pick him up. A woman eventually arrived, and he got into her car. The 2 went out for dinner and took a walk around a nearby building, attempting to appear as though they were casually spending time together, likely to create an alibi for the time of the murder. Meanwhile, police began searching the area. This side, Lauren's parents are dying to know what's going on with their daughter. Students and volunteers began searching west of the North Medical Tower. A team of 6 officers, along with a police dog, joined the search, moving north. Eventually, they discovered Lauren's body inside a silver vehicle. Police cordoned off the crime scene and initiated a nationwide manhunt for Melvin. Authorities had been repeatedly warned that he posed a danger to Lauren, but by the time they acted, it was too late. Now, their only focus was capturing her killer, Melvin. At this time, Melvin was still on the run. He rushed into Trinity Church in Salt Lake City to seek refuge. Police followed him into the building. They also knew that he had weapons and ready to fight back. They searched the church room by room until a single gunshot rang out. Melvin ended his life. When officers found him, the manhunt ended. However, the tragedy was far from over. Lauren, an innocent young woman, was murdered, causing people to demand clarity on the matter. Why had no one taken even the simplest measures to prevent this? How could someone who had pleaded for help and provided all the necessary information be so blatantly ignored? The university had failed to conduct even a basic background check on Melvin. Why hadn't they done so? If they had looked into his history and contacted his probation officer, he will be sent back to prison soon. He has been incarcerated for violating the terms of his probation and has a history of making provocative statements during his parole hearings. When reporters asked Melvin's parole officer if he could have been sent back to prison, the officer made it clear Melvin would have been arrested immediately if the police department informed them of his actions. Officer Miguel Dasso has left the University of Utah Police Force to join the Logan Police Department. However, after his actions came to light, he was promptly fired. Under state obscenity laws, he faces charges for mishandling evidence and showing it to another officer. These charges were later dropped because a data analysis of his phone showed insufficient evidence. Although the charges were dismissed, his actions caused significant harm. What is particularly troubling is that the district attorney has decided not to proceed with the case against him. The case also raises questions about where Melvin got the gun he used. As a parolee and convicted felon, he was legally prohibited from purchasing or possessing a firearm. Investigations revealed that he acquired the gun through a friend, who was also a convicted felon. The friend had his girlfriend purchase the gun on Melvin's behalf. If the gun had not been handed to Lauren would likely still be alive. The McCluskey family sued the University of Utah and its police force, accusing them of being irresponsible and incompetent in handling Lauren's request for help. The lawsuits, initially seeking $56 million, were resolved through settlements.